Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Environment Committee meeting. Today is 16th of July. Before I start the meeting, I would read the fire evacuation in case we have a fire alarm. We got outside guests. In the event of emergency alarm sounding, please leave the building using the nearest available emergency exit as that directed from outside this chamber and assemble at the car park across the road from the Bedford College main entrance, which is to your left as you leave in the front of Borough Hall. Please remain there until you receive further instruction. Thank you. First item on the agenda is question from member of public and member of council. Are there any questions? Okay. Council White, Council John, Council Charlie Royden. So, yes, Council White.
Thank you, Chair. You have to excuse me because I didn't do this in advance and I haven't got the right notes on me. I think this might be for Paul. I'm not sure. Where are we, Paul? There we are. It's to do with the email we received. I think it was on the 16th of the 7th. No, that's today. It's like, when did we receive it? Anyway, it was last week. About the removing two of the public toilets, one in Addison Park and one in Bedford Park. So obviously we know the financial situation of the council, and I must be honest, I didn't see it in the budget that they were going to be removing both of those. This facility in Kempston sits alongside Addison Park, and we've obviously got the play area, we've got sports teams that use the park, residents use it. Yeah, so obviously we're not very happy about that going. I did let Councillor Oliver know because it does actually sit in her ward, but she wasn't copied into the email. So, is this debatable? Is there anything we can do to keep it for our residents and the people who use our facilities in Kempston? And also a link was provided to look at other facilities. I went on the link and Kempston's not in there at all. So, if in the event it has to go, which we're not happy about, could somebody update that link and actually do some work on Kempston so that people, visitors, residents know where they can access the public toilets or facilities? Sorry, that's a bit scrambled.
Yes, Paul.
I'll come back on some of them points, obviously, to make sure we get them sorted out. In regard to them toilets, they're under contract with JC&Co. They were entered into, it does escape me, but probably about 20-25 years ago, some considerable time anyway. The issue is, with the actual toilets themselves, is the parts that JC&Co have in them toilets no longer are available readily or certainly within a reasonable cost. JC&Co, we extended outside the contract last time due to, obviously, JC&Co wanted to decommission them units because they've gone well past their actual lifespan. And also, I believe the employee that manages them toilets also wanted to leave JC&Co's So they were not at a point where we could actually arrange for it to be extended anymore. It got just reached the end where they basically said they weren't prepared to accept them no more and wanted to decommission them.
Councillor White?
Okay, so that's obviously understandable, and obviously I've said about the financial position of this council. But then also where it says, is it the community toilet scheme? If you press on that link, you know, it's like Kempston doesn't exist. There seems to be no work done on that since 2024. And believe it or not, I do get residents who come to community litter picks. We have events in Kempston, and some people need the toilet. So I would like it if we are going to get rid of that toilet in the park, in the main place, that we have accessible toilets for disabled people, for parents, anybody who needs the toilet. Because, you know, we want to welcome people to Kempston as well. It's not just Bedford, you know, and it's a basic sort of, you know, need right for our residents and our visitors to Kempston.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify that, that was one of the elements I was going to come back on to see what opportunities there are for us to work with the community toilet scheme, any of the other businesses around that area that may be happy to sort of promote that and see what other opportunities there are for that. So apologies I didn't make that clear, but that was one of the actions I was going to take away, if that's okay, Councillor White.
Yes, Councillor White.
So just to say thanks for that, and I really need you to emphasise the fact that, you know, Kempston's not mentioned at all. So we really need to start building up, promoting Kempston and the facilities that we've got. Right, thank you, Chair.
Councillor John.
Thank you, Chair. Back in March, I asked a question about Biddenham Country Park. And the minute that generated says, and I quote, "Plans for the Biddenham Great Ouse Way Country Park update be considered by the committee at the July meeting." That's today. In June, I was in Germany. It was lovely. I was on holiday, so I didn't bother to come here. The beer's excellent. But in June, the minutes say, "The Biddenham Country Park item scheduled for the July meeting should be a briefing note circulated to members instead of an agenda item." Question is, where is it?
Yes, John.
Thank you, Councillor Gamble. Yes, it was the work schedule was adjusted last time, as you say. A briefing note has been prepared. It's to be distributed through Democratic Services, so it should be with members of the committee shortly.
You'll remember, John, when we talked about this back in March, I said to you, when can you do it? Because some of my chums wanted a lot sooner. But you said July. And I'm a reasonable chap, so I said, that's fine. This project started in 2018, and nobody can see that anything's happened. I'm very unhappy that somebody, this committee possibly, decided that a briefing note would do. I think this needs to be back on the agenda, PDQ. This needs to be back on the agenda September, and questions able to be asked of it, because at the moment nothing's happening.
September agenda is quite full. We can ask the committee when the spokesperson meeting is, we can ask for the next meeting, because we already discussed, and Councillor Sira, she want to add something on September meeting, and you know, because of heavy agenda already in September, we can look into the October, November, when's the next meeting? Within spokesperson meeting, we can discuss there.
You'll understand my disquiet that it was on this meeting and was taken off, and now you're saying there's no time for it. That doesn't sound right.
Yes, John.
I was going to say, can we take it away and look at the agenda programme, and we'll see where, if indeed we can, bring it as soon as we can back.
Is that okay, John?
I suppose it'll have to be. I mean, as I said on the outset, this project dates from 2018. There is no physical evidence of anything happening.
Thank you, John. Charles.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got an intense dislike of graffiti and fly posting, Chair. I get a very good response from the council in relation to graffiti. We've got an explosion of it across the town at the moment. And in fact, I've given officers a photograph of some of the offenders, the prime offenders. I hope we can do something about that. But fly posting is another great... It makes the place look really, really untidy. And there's an explosion of it across the town at the moment. And I'm disturbed to see that it's advertising an event in our own premises, a wrestling event at the Corn Exchange. And I just wonder if we can have some commitment to have those posters taken down, some prosecutions to follow, and let's not have people having events in our own premises when they're so flagrantly breaking the law. I think an officer is going to give me a response on that.
Was that Paul? Is that yours?
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that on the poster side, but not too much on the wrestling side. But yeah, I need to dive into that one a bit more. I think we have a similar thing with the circuses and the showman's guild, how they are. There are certain aspects that they are allowed to put up posters. I think the wrestling posters are a very similar nature in that they do notify the council somewhere down the lines, and I think we need to coordinate how we deal with that in a slightly different way. So I need to dig a bit more into it. I haven't got the exact answer here at the moment. Certainly where we can do, we'll make sure we can enforce and issue a fixed penalty notice as we do. But I do think they're using a route which is very similar to the showman's guilds and the circuses, in which there is an aspect that they are allowed to notify the council and put up posters as long as they bring them down within a certain period of time. So I wouldn't... It is a slight loophole, I would suggest, but at this moment in time, I'm not sure we can actually prosecute them unless they actually fail to take them down within a certain period of time or advertise in a place where it clearly says they're not allowed to. So I'll give you, if that's okay, I need to do a bit more work on that, Councillor Royden, and I'll give you a full answer. But it's not as easy as I thought it was, to be fair. It's not to say I can't do nothing, or we won't, but we will get to the bottom of it so I can give you a full response.
Yeah. Obviously, I gave notice of the question because I thought it'd be quite an easy thing to answer and say, yeah, of course we'll have those taken down. We're talking about all the way down Britannia Road, Ampthill Road, all around the town, everywhere, fly posting, and I expected that this would just be taken down immediately. And it is disturbing to hear that some people are allowed to fly post and other people aren't. And as for the showgrounds, what have you, when they turn up at the shops in Brickhill and they plaster them all with paste over notice boards and things, I'm disturbed to think that anyone can get away with that kind of behaviour as well. We want to see enforcement against these things in our community, which just make the place look shabby. You know, there's the graffiti turning up everywhere, looking like Naples. It's just disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. And residents in my ward are furious about it. And that's why I've been providing photographs of the offenders. And we need to track these folks down and we need to stop it. But to find out that people using our own premises, our own council premises, are allowed to fly post around this town in the volume that we have, it is disturbing. And I'd be grateful for the reply. Thank you for what you've said, but I am disturbed by it, and I hope that we can get away around this. We shouldn't be allowing our premises to be used by people who fly post, and I would ban them. But thank you for your answer.
Councillor Abbott, do you want to come in? You raised a hand, or no? No. Councillor White.
Well, I mean, just could we have shared with us what the protocol for those who are allowed to do that then, and, you know, understand what the guidelines are, because as Councillor Royden has said, it makes our town look incredibly untidy. And I appreciate, you know, some of the showmen, they do it, you know, to advertise their events. But do we not give them a set of guidelines as to what they can and can't do? Yeah. Or is it just you can slap them anywhere, it's fine, you've rented our premises, we need the money? you know, I'd like to understand what rules we have in place. So if that could be shared with the committee,
Absolutely, yeah.
that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Mr. White.
Yeah, I'll just add to that because I did report this when they went up 2 weeks ago. There's the picture. I did report it. I've got the number. I put it on social media. Residents can't believe the fact that, as you've rightly put, that they're using our premises for this. And the Saxon Centre actually looks absolutely disgusting. They don't take them down. I take them down, and plus probably I'll get in trouble for that. But they get left up. The stuff they put it up with. They've actually ruined one of our new notice boards in Councillor Meader's area. It got plastered to the back, they got taken down, and now it looks disgusting. And it's a new, practically new board. I mean, we're trying to promote our areas. I went to get an X-ray last Sunday at North Wing, and I walked back through town to go to the flea market to support that. I couldn't believe it when I come down Silver Street. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. And we're supposed to be promoting our town and Kempston, making it look nice. And residents, I don't think will believe that there is actually a loophole that this is allowed. And they don't come and take them down, I'm sorry, so...
Okay, Councillor Sira.
Thank you. I'd like to raise the issue of school transport, particularly in our rural communities. Whilst we are rightly encouraging a shift towards more sustainable travel, many families simply don't have access to suitable school bus services, leaving parents with little choice but to drive. Has any work been undertaken or is any planned jointly with Children's Services to review school transport provision and identify gaps in rural bus routes? Improving connectivity for children travelling to and from school would not only support families, but would also contribute to our environmental objectives by reducing unnecessary car journeys. I appreciate that this may sit across more than one committee, and I personally would be very happy to liaise with Children's Services or any relevant committee to help progress this work, if that would be helpful. Thank you.
Is that Joe?
Shall I take this question? Thank you, Councillor Sira. I think it's absolutely an opportunity. We have started to engage with Children's Services and we are looking at opportunities across the whole network to rationalise and potentially, hopefully, make savings. So it's work in progress.
Yes, Councillor Abbott.
I'm really worried to hear words rationalise and make savings. I believe Councillor Sira's question was actually about providing a suitable school transport bus network. And I'm not, you know, and actually it's probably one of the first times I say I agree with Councillor Sira on what she says and how important we do this because sustainable transport is key. And I'm going to be honest, the first words I hear are savings and rationalisation. That does not sound to me that we're actually going to look at doing something which will be positive. It sounds to me like, I know the purse strings are pretty tight anyway, we're going to tighten them even further. It'd be nice to have a response. We said we're going to look at it and the team are going to work with Children's Services to create a network which actually works for residents. And, you know, I have residents who have children who go to Sharnbrook. Getting to Sharnbrook is quite difficult from some of my villages. And actually, all I hear is the story we've heard for buses for the last couple of years is cuts, cuts, cuts. Can we now change the record on buses? We've got the bus operators here tonight. It will segue nicely into it. And actually, can we start to look forward with our buses and start to do something positive for our residents?
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Sira, do you want to come back or you raise your hand?
No, yes, thank you. I also, would like to echo Councillor Abbott's opinion in regards to that, although I didn't take it as much to that extent because I know that and correct me if I'm wrong, but when we're talking about budgeting, it's because it's over 2 portfolios, like services and environmental, and that's what I interpreted. But it's really good that actually Councillor Abbott brought up that point, because I think it's an important distinction for all the residents watching this who understand this, because not everyone's going to have that information. But while I've got you, can I please add something else to that? In our last meeting, I also requested information and clarification on what we were going to do in regards to the buses that have been minimised in the rural areas, and the written response I got was that we're considering this. What does that mean? You've had a look at a piece of paper, you've looked at the statistics, what exactly is being considered? Because there's individuals, residents out there who have no form of transport and were extremely reliant on this transport, and now they don't have any. If I could please get some clarification on that, I'd really appreciate it, other than we've considered it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sirra. I apologise if my comments were misinterpreted. I know as soon as we mention savings, everyone seems to, it's panic stations. It doesn't necessarily mean, I think it's an opportunity, it's an absolute opportunity, and a positive opportunity to work with the public, the operators and school transport, children's school transport, to look at the opportunities across the piece. On the other question, rural services, I'll have to revert. Paul, is that something you can respond to? Sorry, I wasn't involved.
Yeah, just on that point, I think the question was on about using smaller buses or mini buses, etc. That was a consideration, but the contract that actually we decided to go with, we explored that, and it's not something that can be actually delivered, and that's not that's in the rural rounds. That's not we haven't reduced anything, and you know, that's not to say that we've stopped something and we haven't put something on. That contract is still the same as what it was. I think that it was consideration using smaller buses, which unfortunately isn't an option in this particular case.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Chair. Just on that, Paul, thank you, and I appreciate it's been considered, but can we just know why that outcome is the outcome it is, and what information they have to back that outcome, sorry, even if it's a written answer? So what statistics did they rely on for them to come to the conclusion that actually, well, we've got a service anyway, we don't need a smaller bus? Because previously they relied upon statistics that not enough people were using the buses, and then we've given an alternative and said, well, okay, why don't you put a smaller bus out? That'll be a little bit more feasible, and now we're being told, actually, no, that's not going to work either, but we're not being told why. All I want to know is why. Thank you.
Sorry, just come back on that point. I think the rural contract is a contract we go out and tender. It runs for a number of years. To make any significant changes to that would cause a issue with the contract. Potentially would have to ease ourselves out of that contract, which will be a financial risk on the council. So that is something we can certainly explore in the future. But when that contract went out a couple of years ago, there were requests and an amount of passengers that it was catered for. The providers don't have that type of vehicle in their fleet, and that was evaluated and stuff, and we went out with a certain specification requiring the providers meet that specification. Now, in the future, when that contract comes up for the rural rounds, we can certainly have a look at that, and we can certainly work with the operators to see if that's an opportunity, or work with several operators. If one couldn't provide the smaller vehicles, we could have one providing smaller vehicles and one providing the slightly smaller buses as well. So that, you know, there is opportunities there, but whilst we're in a contract situation, it is rather challenging and puts a lot of risk on the council to make any significant changes to that particular contract.
Okay, I'll move on to the agenda item number 2, apologies and absence. I've received the apologies from Councillor Atkin, Craig Aston and Simon Newport from UNO. Councillor Oliver will be substituting for Councillor Atkin and Councillor Gammett will be substituting for Councillor Simon. Are there any other apologies for tonight? Anybody know? No? There's a small note. Please can we note the representative of the bus operator have volunteered to attend the meeting to assist committee in its discussion. I would like to ask the member of the committee to treat our guest with respect. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, minutes of the last meeting. Does the committee approve the minutes of the meeting held on 18th June 2026 as a correct record and authorize me to sign them? Thank you. Okay. Agenda item number 4, disclosure of local and disclosable pecuniary interest. As I know, member appreciate it's important that we observe provision in the code of conduct relating to disclosure of the interest. Is anybody got any interest to declare? No?
I would declare it as a bus user, a fairly regular bus user. And obviously we have got bus operators in tonight. So some of my questions might feel a little biased just because I know how important our bus services are.
That's perfect. Thank you. I have a request to move the agenda item number 7 up to the agenda. So we move to agenda item number 7. Please, could I ask John Molyneux, Director of Environment, to provide the update? And I believe the Gavin as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we've got tonight the Head of Planning and Building Control, Gavin Chenier. If we could welcome him to the committee. I don't think you've been to this committee before, Gavin, but Gavin's going to give the verbal update on the Local Plan 2050. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Councillor Atik. Evening all. So, local plan updates. As you know, the local plan, a timetable was approved by Executive on the 8th of April. The timetable sets out a series of key milestones leading up to the formal adoption of the new local plan in November 2029. The next key milestone in the programme was the call for sites, which went live on Friday, the 10th of July. This marks a significant stage in the local plan process. The call for sites will remain open until the 30th of October and provides an opportunity for landowners, developers, businesses, community groups, parish councils, residents to suggest sites and development opportunities that could help shape the borough's future. The exercise is open to anyone wishing to promote land for development, for small infill sites through to large strategic locations. Please note that you must either own the site or land parcel or have the landowner's permission in order to submit it. Submitting a site or development proposal does not guarantee that it will be included in the new local plan. All sites and development opportunities will be assessed against a range of factors including access to services, flood risk, contamination and other planning constraints. I'd like to thank the team for all their hard work in delivering the local plan currently. This is an exciting time for the Council as we plan for the significant growth required across the borough, and the new local plan will play a vital role in shaping that future. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's the current update on the local plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, and nice to see you again, Gavin. So, what are the principal risks to maintaining the local plan timetable? Because we've got quite a tight timetable now. We've got 30 months, haven't we? Or 30 months less. Now the starting gun has been fired. So what are the risks you perceive to maintaining that local plan timetable and putting some surety back for our residents when it comes to building in the borough?
I think there's several risks. So when we went out for the executive meeting in April, there was a project plan which was adopted and considered as part of the executive meeting. And in that project plan, there were various sort of risks to the plan. It could be changing legislation in terms of the government could change different policies in terms of how we look to bring forward the plan. There could be risks in terms of staffing as well. If people leave, people go, and things like that, that could be a risk to the plan as well. And basically just changes in terms of like getting any sort of evidence-based documents and getting people to actually provide the relevant information for the local plan. I mean, currently at the moment, as you said, Councillor Abbott, we are working to a very tight time scale in terms of this 30-month period. We are on track in terms of what we're doing. We're putting out all the stops internally in terms of, you know, going out for evidence-based, going through the procurement process and things like that internally. So that's the risks really. But at the moment, we're working to that. And a key significant milestone was the call for sites. You know, moving that to a digital platform. From previously, it was all like a sort of like an email submission. But, you know, the team pulled out all the stops for that. And that's quite a new procedure as part of the call for sites. So we're working really hard internally to make sure we adhere to the actual current timetable. But hopefully that gives you a flavour of what some of the risks could be to the timetable.
Yes, Councillor.
Actually, you know, one of the questions is, since the gun has been started, how many months have we got left? Because obviously it was 30 months from kick-off, and I can't remember quite where we are. So I'm going to ask you to possibly use your fingers and work out how many months we have left.
So the main kick-off is Gateway 1, which is basically in April next year. So at the moment, we're in a scoping stage. We're doing all the call for sites, and then we're basically going for all the evidence-based, and we're trying to get all that in stage. That's the 30 months starts basically from Gateway 1. So that's where we are at the moment.
So the gun hasn't actually been fired yet. What happens if we don't hit Gateway 1 in April?
Well, we're hoping that we will do that. But obviously, if we don't meet that, we would have to come back to the executive and look to set the new sort of timetable. But at the moment, that's what we're working to. We haven't raised any concerns as a planning department in terms of meeting that timetable. So if we don't meet it, then we would have to come back to the executive to look at the timetable again. But currently, we're not looking at that at all.
Yes, Councillor Abbott, do you have another question?
I do. I have a different question this time rather than a follow-on to it. One of the key things which I think probably really vexes residents when we talk about things like local plan and the fact we're mandated to build lots of houses, and it's I don't think people necessarily realise that we can't just turn around and say, as Bedford Borough, we don't want to do that. It's a top-down mandate which hits us. But one of the things I think people always worry about is actually, you know, how are we coordinating things like transport planning into this? How are we coordinating the infrastructure into it? You know, and the bits which won't necessarily be blunt, won't make house builders money. Actually, you know, putting the infrastructure in. How are we doing this? How are we integrating it? You know, we've got this going to have a 40,000 residents town in Tempsford. We've already had, you know, we've already seen that Little Barford's kicking off with 4,000 sites there. We'll have development, which I imagine will go along with Universal as well. And people are saying it's great, you know, we're seeing this investment, but actually what is being done to provide services? And how can we build that into the local plan? Are we able to build that into the local plan? Because people might be a little more accepting of the fact house building is going to happen if we can integrate that. So how can that happen? How does that happen?
I think that's a really good question. So as part of the local plan process, there are different stages we have to engage with our partners. So basically, our partners could be surrounding boroughs, in terms of like CBC, MK, you know, Luton, and make sure they buy into that support. As I said earlier, we are looking at evidence-based documents, so getting up-to-date evidence-based documents. We are starting the process in terms of a sort of statement of common ground with our partners. So that could be anything from dealing with national highways. So national highways was a big issue for the 2040 plan. and we're engaging with them at an early stage with all sort of highway matters. So we're looking at the modelling data, so feeding into, So if you look at the highways issue for one moment, so we will do a whole comprehensive sort of modelling data. Once we know, you know, for the call for sites aspect, for example, and we know we are going to agree on the call for sites, which is a long process to go through, we would feed that into modelling data and get a sort of response about what is the impact on our local roads, for example. For example, coming back to services like health, GP practices, and you know, all those sort of care, we'll be engaging with the ICB on that to see what are the needs for that, and also there'll be an evidence-based document for that as well. So that's how we would facilitate that and make sure we overcome all these issues which are concerning to residents going forward. So there's quite a process to go through in terms of this, but that's what we would do to facilitate any questions or any concerns raised by the general public and by councillors on the local plan.
Thank you, Gavin. Do you have another question?
I do. It's sort of following on from that, and actually, you know, one of the key bits I asked about there was transport planning, and I know we have some bus operators in the room tonight. As part of it, do we speak to the public transport providers? Because actually, you know, we're going to have new rail infrastructure, we've got current rail infrastructure, we've got bus operators who we hope will keep operating as well. You know, are you then talking to Joanne and her team, and you know, school transport, that's like, you know, because it should be a holistic, I believe it should be a holistic look. So when we create this plan, we're not just going to come up with however many houses we've been mandated by the government, but actually, you know, it would be good to see, you know, our transport in there. We're thinking about our transport in the future. Because one of the things we've heard is we had to re-tender the rural bus network. Nothing happened for 14 years. So let's look ahead as things change and see if we can build some of that into the plan. Because again, I think people will buy in better to it if they go, not only is Bedford Borough going to build all this, but actually as part of the plan, they're going to do this with transport. They're going to work with bus operators, they're going to work with train operators. Not so easy to get train operators to move his train route as such, but you can get them to stop at our station. I'm thinking about East Midlands. Please stop your fast trains at Bedford. But, you know, it's just, you know, the bus operators, I'm sure, would be delighted to engage and, you know, tell you how we can provide something which will be fit for the purpose for our residents in the future. So do we do that? Are we able to do that? Does the law allow us to do that, actually? That's probably one of the questions, because this is a very legal thing we're doing.
So in short, yes, that's what we will do. And as a officer base, we've actually produced a scoping report, which has basically gone to the wider council to engage with all the different departments in the council. So those different departments will feed into the local plan, and yes, we would engage wider in terms of wider than the council, in terms of like bus operators, etc., the railways, etc., as well, to actually make sure we safeguard for those issues as part of the local plan. So hopefully that provides a bit more clarity on that. Councillor Abbott.
Anybody else got any question on local plan 2015? Okay, good. Sorry.
I was just going to add to Gavin's comments. In addition to that, as the local transport plan will be refreshed, and that will capture elements such as public transport, rail, freight, etc., etc. So that's something that will support and underpin the local plan.
Okay, Joe. We move on to the comments. You got any comments for local plan? Okay, John.
Other than thank you, Gavin, for coming tonight and telling us about it. We're looking forward to regular updates across the meetings, because this is such a key thing for our residents. We are, yeah, like we see at planning committee, we're seeing applications coming in where I think in our heart we know that's probably not right, but because we are currently under the tilted balance, we have to be granting, you know, we have to put forward applications. Usually officers just be able to reject in the first place. So thank you for that. Thank you for the work your team are doing. We look forward to the updates. You know, we look forward to seeing a really good holistic local plan coming forward in about 2029, which all councillors can get behind and endorse, you know, and be part of that, bringing Bedford very much into, you know, forward into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor John. I got a small comment as a chair. Okay, the local plan 2050 will shape Bedford Borough for a generation. It is essential that growth infrastructure-led, not housing-led. New development must be supported by school, GP, surgery, road, public transport, and community facilities from outset. We must also prioritize brownfield development, protect our green spaces where possible, ensure the residents are genuinely listened to throughout the process. If we get this plan wrong, future generation will live with the consequences. Thank you, Gavin. And I believe you need to leave, so, you know, if you want to stay, we are more happy to stay. And if you want to leave, then we are quite happy as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
We move back on the agenda item number 5, bus services in the borough. So can I ask Paul, please, to introduce everybody and open the support?
Thank you very much, Chair. Can we have the first slide up, please? Thank you. So, first of all, obviously, I'd like to introduce you to the people and the team that are involved with the transport on the Borough Council side. Obviously, that's myself, that's Joanne Branston-Budd as well, who's the head of service. We've got Sarah Fleckney here as well, from the transport side. We've also got the portfolio holder for environment, where is she? Councillor Nicola Gribble, and we've also got representatives from Grant Palmer who will introduce themselves in a minute, and also Stagecoach as well. Unfortunately, Uno was unable to attend this meeting and sends their apologies, and hope to make a further one or pick up any questions and stuff that the committee wishes to make. So if you could just obviously drop that slide, thank you. So I'd just like to obviously pass you to Councillor Nicola Gribble, first of all, just to give a bit of an introduction before we actually then invite the bus operators to answer questions and any other aspects the committee wishes to take forward.
Thank you, Paul. So good evening, members, colleagues and partners. I want to take a moment to recognise the vital role that Bedford Borough's bus operators play in keeping our town, our borough moving. Too often the conversation focuses on what isn't working, but tonight I want to highlight what is working and the operators who are delivering it every single day. Bedford is fortunate to have operators who are rooted in the community, who employ local people and who are committed to providing reliable, accessible and affordable transport for our residents. Companies like Grant Palmer, Stagecoach East, Uno and others form the backbone of our public transport network. They connect people to work, education, healthcare, shopping, leisure and to each other. They are part of the fabric of Bedford Borough. Across the borough, operators are investing in newer vehicles, improving routes, strengthening timetables and responding to the needs of our communities. We have seen operators step in when commercial services have been withdrawn, redesign routes to maintain essential links, and work directly with councillors to understand local priorities. These are not signs of decline, they are signs of commitment, resilience and partnership. Every day, drivers, engineers, schedulers and the depot teams work hard to deliver services that thousands of our residents rely on. They do this in the face of rising costs, congestion, roadworks and the wider national challenges facing the bus industry. Yet despite all of this, Bedford's operators continue to innovate, adapt and deliver. We should be proud of the operators who choose to invest in Bedford, proud of the services that have been protected and improved, proud of the partnerships that have formed between operators, councillors and communities, and proud of the shared ambition to build a stronger, more reliable and more sustainable bus network for the future. As we look ahead, let's continue to work together, operators, councillors, officers and residents, to champion public transport, support innovation and ensure that Bedford Borough remains a place where bus services can thrive. and I welcome our bus operators. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we can have the next slide up. We have got some questions from some of the councillors, so I don't know which way we're going to run this, whether we're going to ask Grant or Stagecoach to obviously answer some of the questions that are on the screen and also add anything else they wish to start with before any further questions. Who wants to start?
Yeah, so I think most of you have seen me before, but I'm Charles Fawn, I'm Head of Commercial for Stagecoach, covering the whole of Stagecoach East. Obviously we're here today to talk about Bedford. So I think we've got a few points on each bullet point that they provided to us before the meeting. So if we talk about service reliability and punctuality, data on cancellations, delays across the network. So generally we split those two aspects, reliability and punctuality, into different pots. So reliability for us is making sure we've got the bus and the driver and that it's out on the road operating the mileage that we said we were going to operate. So reliability is virtually solely within our own control. So that, you know, that's down to us to make sure we've got drivers, we've got buses, the buses are maintained, the buses are fixed, we've got fuel, all that sort of stuff that goes into making sure they're on the road. In terms of our reliability, so that aspect, we're actually very, very good, sort of industry leading. We generally have sub 1% lost mileage. So that means we operate above 99% of our scheduled mileage consistently. And we have done now for probably 18 months, close to 2 years. So that's really, really good. The challenge for bus operators, it's not unique to Bedford, but the challenge for bus operators is the punctuality side. That's once we put the bus and the driver on the road, most of the things that affect punctuality are actually outside of our control, and that's things like roadworks, congestion, you know, anything that affects the bus getting from A to B. That's largely outside of our control, apart from timetable changes, which we can do to address some of that congestion, journey times extended. But there's always a trade-off with timetable changes to address punctuality, because there's one of two things you'd need to do. You need to have more cycle time, basically. So if a bus is taking 60 minutes to get from point A to point B and back to point A, it now needs 66 minutes. You need to do one of two things. You need to either add a bus in, which is about loosely somewhere between £200,000 worth of cost annually, to keep the status quo. That is, there's no improvement to this, it's just to make it slightly more punctual. Or you need to reduce the frequency to thus give it more time to go from A to B. Reducing the frequency is not ideal because it gives passengers less of a service and it's less attractive, so you generally get passenger and revenue loss when you reduce frequencies. So that's a real challenge for us. It's not unique to Bedford. Most areas are suffering with this extended journey times, and that is a focus. So in terms of, I guess people are going to be interested in how we're doing since our big network change. So we obviously made quite a major network change, and part of that we did a customer-focused market research. We employed an external company to come in and do some market research, customer-focused market research in Bedford. And as one of those key takeaways from that was the punctuality. They wanted, you know, people want their buses to be more punctual, which we kind of knew already, but the market research just helped a third party essentially affirm what we kind of knew. So one of the key aims of that service chain, network change, was to improve timetables, improve punctuality of services. So since, if we take the 6 weeks post-change to the 6 weeks pre-change, because we're just over 6 weeks from that change, the total punctuality for the town services increased by about 1%, but that is somewhat skewed by the W2, the new route, which is a completely new routing. So that's kind of not necessarily guesswork, but it's quite hard to get a brand new route in to be punctual from the first, you know, from go. So we've got a timetable change scheduled for September to address some of those punctuality concerns on the W2. If you strip out that new route, the W2, the town network's actually improved by about 3.2% punctuality since the service change. So, you know, we've made an improvement, which is one of our aims, so that was good. Rural connectivity, I think you touched on the rural connectivity. Just to give some more information on that, I know you mentioned minibuses, smaller buses. So the challenge with that from operators like us is that the main cost of running the bus isn't the fuel, which is the main saving you'll get from a minibus compared to a big bus. Fuel is only about 20% of the cost. The main cost is the driver salary, driver hour. So we pay our drivers the same whether they're driving a minibus, a single deck or a double deck. So actually, by running minibuses, you're not going to get much of a saving compared to running the big bus. The other challenge is, you could say, well, during the off-peak, those buses are running around with only a couple of people on. You could use a minibus by passenger loadings. True, on the rural services, probably you could, but you'd probably still need the bigger buses for the peaks. In that scenario, you'd have to have a big bus for the peaks and a minibus for the off-peaks. You then start maintaining 2 vehicles. So you're still paying your 60% of your cost for the driver, but now you're also maintaining 2 vehicles. So it's not always cost effective. So one of the challenges of that, and one of the opportunities I suppose Bedford has, is, as Joanne alluded to, is that rationalisation of your school transport network, which are your own minibuses. So you could utilise them better, and I don't want to put words in the officer's mouths, but that's an opportunity where you could use those minibuses for more rural services as part of a rationalisation. There'd obviously be a cost to that, and that's for the council to weigh up that they're your services. In terms of accessibility and disabled and elderly passengers, all of our vehicles are what's called PASVAR, PSVAR compliant. So we all use manual wheelchair ramps as well, which are more reliable than electric wheelchair ramps. Also, you have that driver interaction where you can assist passengers getting on rather than just sitting in the cabin pushing a button. We're also in the process, and we should have complete by August, rolling out the next stop announcements, audio and visual next stop announcements. So there is a government deadline for that for October, but we will have it all up and running by August, and we're on track to do that. We've got about 70% of the fleet in Bedford already up and running. We just need to finish that off by the end of this month, which we will do. So for that, I think that kind of touches on that. But I will take any more questions if there are something I've not covered. Environmental performance, so low emission electric vehicle fleets. So as Stagecoach as a group, we've committed to being fully electric by 2035. It's a challenge, but as a group for quite a few years now, we've taken the view we no longer buy diesel vehicles. So any new vehicles we're buying as a group are all electric, and we're slowly cascading our diesel vehicles and phasing them out. So there is a big caveat with electric vehicles in that they cost about 70% more than a diesel vehicle currently on the market. So you're looking for a diesel vehicle about £289,000 for a double deck. For an electric vehicle, the average is closer to £500,000 per vehicle. So that there is a big capital cost on that. On top of that, you've then got 75k per vehicle on average for the installation of the infrastructure that's required, so the charging infrastructure. Sometimes, like for Cambridge, for example, we had to make upgrades to the national grid, build a substation in the depot. There's lots of things that needed to happen for electrification. The key with attaining electrification in Bedford is there must be a sustainable network that's given a return on that investment. So as with any business, it's very difficult to put in a huge capital investment in a business that's not making a return on that. So that again is one of the driving factors of why we needed to tailor the network and generate some growth from our service change, is because over the coming years to get that investment we need a profitable bus depot really that's going to give us a return. So passenger driver safety, including measures to reduce antisocial behaviour and improve safety at bus stops. So all of our, so just personally from Stagecoach, all of our buses, all of our drivers, all of our staff are trained on what's called a business against abuse. So initially it was a Cambridgeshire and Cambridgeshire Police initiative that we were a part of, it's called Purple Flag, which is a group we're part of in Cambridgeshire. But we decided to roll it out across the whole of East. So all of our drivers have done this training. This is essentially for those in the evening, nighttime economy, but not necessarily throughout the day, any time, but probably aimed at those evening, nighttime economies. For anyone that feels unsafe, so for example, somebody might be worried somebody's following them or something like that. Drivers are trained how to deal with those situations. Never all had specific training, won a few awards for that rollout, and I think the DFT are now making that part of a CPC course, so most bus companies will end up doing something similar on that. In terms of bus stops, that's more probably your officers with your infrastructure, but that's just for me to wrap up all those points, but happy to take questions on all of them.
Thank you. If there's any other report to present?
Good evening, councillors. My name's Thomas. I'm the commercial manager for Grant Palmer. We're extremely concerned about the narrative about bus services in Bedford. As I sit on the riverside and I read the Times and Citizen, I see a constant narrative of doom and gloom. Passenger numbers down, revenue down, fewer services, less opportunities for people to see friends, get to hospital, get there where they need to be. That narrative doesn't match up with my experience. It doesn't match up with my experience at Grant Palmer. We're seeing good passenger growth. We're seeing year-on-year increases on our buses. A couple of examples I bring tonight. Service 25 between Bedford and Harold is up over 123%. Services 42, recently extended in partnership with Central Bedfordshire to Dunstable, up year-on-year, 47%. Growth on service 68. Even the routes which haven't seen significant timetable improvements are seeing 32% growth year-on-year. Why are we seeing that growth? We're seeing it because we're investing. Every year we take delivery of 2 brand new vehicles. We invest back in our business. We put low emission buses back into fleet, making the air quality in Bedford better, making the experience better for my customers too. It's frustrating though to see this narrative of doom and gloom in the local gazette. We've all seen it, we're all well aware of it. Councillors will see firsthand in some wards where their services are being reduced. We're working against that tide. We're increasing our staff numbers. We're creating more jobs for people locally. We're taking on our Flitwick and our Biggleswade sites, creating new roles for people. We're continuing to market. We held our fares as low as we could. We offer discounted weekly travel. We do everything we can to encourage people. Officers, councillors may be familiar with our Christmas video that comes out annually as our attempt to get into the mindset of all of our customers. You might have seen our work at Rail Bedford. We're part of the community and we want people travelling by bus. We're mindful that the coverage of recent bus service changes has been negative. Grant Palmer, we look to the future. We see Bedford as an opportunity for our business, for our customers and our colleagues. We are blessed with huge industrial, residential, commercial development to come to the town in the years to come. I would like to think that councillors have received copies of our document, our plan, our focus, the Bedford Area Transit. If you haven't received it, please do follow up with me. It gives you an outline as to our vision for bus services in the borough and across over the next 5 years. It's about partnership. It's about the standards we expect, the level of service expected for our customers, as well as how we can work with Bedford Borough Council to improve the day-to-day. We've also outlined proposals for an experimental service between Kempston, Bedford and Putney, and how we might work in partnership with the local authority to deliver that following recent changes in the network. This document outlines a vision. It turns around the narrative of doom and gloom and it looks to a brighter future. When I first moved to Bedford around 8 years ago, we had buses every 10 to 15 minutes on key corridors. We had a good high level of service. We want to bring that back. We want to see improvements in our network. My colleague from Stagecoach Charlton has touched on points 1 to 5. I'll just give an update from a Grant Palmer perspective. So on service reliability, we too measure our performance on a weekly basis. Our performance analysis was awarded a UK Bus Award for its innovation. We measure by trip and my managers are encouraged on a daily basis to report on every bus journey that's run. And every day they are scrambling to make sure every journey comes and operates at 100%. We too share a 99.3% trip rate and we continue to deliver that. We've been asked about the report of punctuality data. Punctuality in Bedford is a challenge. It's a river town. There's one bridge in and there's one bridge out, and there's very little bus priority. In fact, bus priority in Bedford's been reduced over the past 4 to 5 years. Horn Lane, now the message is that we queue and wait for car drivers to access the Riverside car park before we get out of the town centre. St Paul's Square has less bus space than it did previously. We are seeing challenges locally in the town centre which are slowing our buses down and making them less attractive to customers. If we were to report on punctuality, we want a commitment from the borough. What will the borough do? What can officers guarantee us? What measures will they take? In other areas, they've used bus service improvement plan funds to look at key junctions, reconfigure traffic light signallings to prioritise buses, examples of which in Dunstable, examples across the county, even as far as Potton, are seeing these changes to give way to buses to speed them up. We want to see those improvements and will provide data so long as there's a targeted approach to improving bus speeds in our area. The subject of rural connectivity is covered in good detail in our Bedford area transit document. We were the incumbent operator of the Bedford North tender for a number of years. We invested heavily during that time, taking again 2 brand new vehicles every year, investing in ticketing solutions, improving the customer experience, taking vehicles from small 16-seat Ford Transits to brand new minibuses year on year, reducing the number of old high-emission vehicles, and by the end of our tenure on the contract, most journeys were operated with a Euro 6 single-deck bus, something we don't necessarily see today. We want to work to improve rural connectivity. When I lived in Risley for a number of years, I was frustrated at the level of service, and we built it up. We put more peak journeys on. We did what we could as an operator to improve that timetable. We talked a little about scholars and integration. It came as great frustration that when the North Beds tender was re-tendered, the scholars aspect was taken from it. Key revenue that could have been used to build up those services was taken out of that package and separated. The sustainability of those services is now lessened because that peak time revenue isn't there to support it. Charlton talked a little about accessibility. I mirror his comments that we too operate a fully accessible fleet. We are wheelchair compliant. We have next stop announcements underway. There are challenges because when you ring up to order them, you say you'd like 30, not 3,000. It's a bit like being in the chip shop queue and only asking for 3 sausages, not the football team that's waiting to come in. We will have this in place, and our app has next stop announcements built in as well. We are continuing to invest in accessible training, CPC and safeguarding as well. One of the points raised was busing new development. When we look to a number of the recent developments, Gold Lane at Bidnam, that's not been designed with buses in mind. There's no way a bus will ever pass through there. The curbing, the road surface used, the layout of the houses, buses wouldn't easily penetrate to come back in or out. It's a real missed opportunity. The development immediately to its right as you pass through Bidnam, there's no Section 106 award. It is a great frustration that we see as an operator that other local authority areas are writing in very specific requirements that when new housing developments are underway, you request next stop announcements, contribution towards shelters, contribution towards service provision. That's a fundamental. They're talking about working collaboratively with Luton Borough Council and Milton Keynes to agree a set standard. We haven't seen that yet, and we really would like to see Bedford join that standard too. We also see that there are challenges with new developments. If we look at house building rates in Wixham's and occupation, post-COVID, that's slowed massively. It's frustrating to see that the funds that are tied up in the Wixham's development are still a very long way from being able to be used to support bus services. That's partly because of post-COVID house market, and that's partly because of the frustration and the bureaucracy attached to procuring a bus service. It's a technically difficult area. If you support a brand new bus service, as we've seen examples in the past, like Service 24, if it doesn't meet its commerciality by the end of its contract period, it can't continue. If you try and directly award to an operator with a de minimis payment, that payment comes under direct scrutiny by officers who find the procurement rules too complicated or often too frustrating to be able to do it. From our perspective, we would like to see a strategy come from officers for new build in Bedford. We're going to see it with Universal, we're going to see it with Wixham's, we're going to see it as East West Rail comes to the town. Let's coordinate our transport approach. We've talked a little bit about environmental performance. Our keenness is on Euro 6 diesel. The NOx emissions from that are 98% less than Euro 5. They're a lot better for the environment, a lot better for the residents in Bedford than older diesel bus. There are challenges. Charleston mentioned some financial issues with deployment of new vehicles, but we must look to our geography too. Stewartby has a low bridge. We border the Thameslink line. We border the network up in Sharnbrook. Most modern electric buses have batteries fitted to the roofs. It's not a practical engagement for those vehicles in similar areas such as Harold, Carlton and Oakley, where the bridges have weight restrictions and the vehicles are incredibly heavy and would not pass those. So as an authority, we need to consider what we can do in the meantime. I think the best solution would be to support Euro 6 diesel and to support a better quality of vehicle standard for our customers. We see that the final comment was to talk about safety. We've done a lot of work as an operator. We're family owned. We know what matters to our customers. We know that the people getting on and off our buses matter to the people that see them off in the morning for school and welcome back home in the evening. We deliver safeguarding training as CPC, particularly focusing on the county lines issue, which is prevalent just south of Bedford town centre as you come in. We deliver this routinely. It's accredited from our own CPC training centre, and these courses we write in partnership. We're just about to launch a similar one with another local authority picking up on their issues to try and get our 8 hours of training that drivers legally have to do to have some real punch and energy to it. The challenge that you see, I'm a bus user myself. I'll be catching the 42 home this evening to get back to Flitwick. We've done everything we can do. Our buses are covered in CCTV, that's HD sound recording with live access. We routinely support. We have a safeguarding lead on site that's available to field inquiries and drivers. We have live action reporting through the ticket machines. But when you stand at a bus station, it feels as though these safeguarding concerns dwindle. What support has been given? We often face challenges with antisocial behaviour, street drinking. There have been enforcement actions put in place, but this displaces people to, apologies, I always get the name of the square wrong, near to the Lidl shop as you head out towards Goldington, as they're then displaced towards the bus station into the colder climes. It's frustrating that there is no strategy on antisocial behaviour on bus in Bedford. We've had similar work done in Luton, we've done similar work in central Bedfordshire. It's been really, really positive. I want to see us move forward. I think it's imperative that we look at what we've proposed and we think about how we can deliver better services for Bedford. I welcome any questions or comment on the address.
Councillor Oliver and then Councillor Abbott. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not normally a member of this committee, but for once I jumped at the chance to substitute because I knew nothing about buses, bus routes, anything until we sat in this chamber at the end of March, wasn't it, when the stagecoach kindly came along and outlined their changes to service. And this will come into a question or two eventually. And at first, well, we had to keep it quiet. It was commercially sensitive, and I did what I was asked. I kept it quiet until it was announced and it hit the fan big time in the ward I represent, which is Kempston North, the Hillgrounds Loop. But it hit the fan big time in Putney and De Paris and Goldington. So there's a lot of anger across the borough, which initially was aimed at the bus companies, particularly Stagecoach, but I've become, to an understanding now as to why we're in the position we're in. So what I would first of all like to say is I welcome the document that Thomas kindly circulated to members. I would like to see that kind of document coming from the council, and I hope I eventually will. But if I can take, my first question would be to, I want to say Grant Palmer, but it's not, it's Thomas. In that document, you say that over the past few years, we have found working with Bedford Borough Council difficult, and we are a long way from an effective partnership. So could you please describe the difficulties you have experienced in recent years and what you think needs to change to improve that situation?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. The relationship between Grant Palmer and Bedford Borough Council is well documented in the local press. If one comes away from the meeting tonight and wants to Google Grant Palmer Bedford Borough Council, you can read some of the challenges we faced. We see that we have really good engagement with councillors. We've engaged with councillors like John Abbott when there was difficulty last year at the withdrawal of Service 51. We've engaged with councillors in Wootton to put on an experimental bus service. We've engaged with councillors on Service 41 to let them know the new route and the pathing that's come in. Our challenge comes often with officers. We have deployed significant resource to demonstrate that we want to work with Bedford Borough Council. We put proposals, as I'm aware, Councillor Oliver, you represent the part of Kempston affected by the withdrawal of Service 53. We put proposals for a replacement service. We haven't heard back. We engage fully with a number of initiatives, but there's no response, and that's really frustrating. There have been challenges in the past. The North Beds tender is often cited. We've had challenges in particular with that, and we still see it today. There is duplication of the tendered network over the top of the commercial bus network, which only serves to undermine all services. We want to work together. We've engaged fully, and we want to see improvements. I think that gives a fair summary of our position, and our attendance tonight is testament to the fact that we do listen. We are local, we are in the road, and you'll probably bump into me on Saturday at the River Festival, which I hope to see you all at. But I do stress that there are challenges. You know, we have submitted proposals, we don't hear back. We want to engage with officers, and it feels as though the frustrations are coming apparent.
Yes,
may I put a similar question then to Stagecoach and preface that by saying that UNO aren't here tonight, but I have met with their commercial director, and he painted a similar picture. In fact, he contacts me now to ask if I've heard any updates from the council. So that's not very good, really. I mean, I hope we can improve that. So can I just ask Stagecoach a similar thing then? Have you had a similar experience? What are the problems you've experienced, and what do you see as being the solutions to those communication difficulties, let's call it?
Yeah, so I think probably our experience is slightly more positive than Grant Palmer's. I think there's a few reasons for that. I think historically we've operated very little of your tendered network, so our actual engagement and need to engage with officers over those services, we didn't have the same level of engagement because we wasn't operating services on your behalf like Grant Palmer have a lot more tendered services. So for us, the engagement's been generally positive. There's been times that we feel sometimes we've been let down either through officers or decisions from the council, such as free parking. We was lobbying hard that the impact that was having on bus services during that period, but I wouldn't say that was necessarily the officers' detriment to the officers. That was, as a council decision. River Festival, some of the signage towards our park and ride that we operated at the last festival was a bit disappointing. We felt that was underutilised, and again this year we've taken a decision now not to provide that because nobody used it essentially. But there wasn't any real signage to that park and ride site. I think Tom Grant Palmer is still operating a park and ride for the River Festival, but I will let Tom confirm that. But generally it's a positive relationship. We have regular catch-ups around your tendered network and performance, and provide data regarding the performance of your tendered network, and we're happy to do so. So I mean, every local authority has challenges with buses in terms of our wants and asks and bus priority measures that we want and your ability to deliver them. That's not unique to Bedford. That's the case in most local authorities. So yeah, I think slightly better maybe Grant Palmer's interaction. But again, that's probably defined by our network and what we operate.
Thank you. I do have a question for officers, but perhaps I can come back later with that.
Yeah. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming this evening. Appreciate it. Absolutely, we appreciate the bus services you operate within the borough. So I know there was a thing said at the beginning about being obviously polite and courteous to you. I'd hope we always are anyway, because actually we really appreciate what you do. You know, the fact you are here. I was slightly surprised to hear there that you've said, this is Stagecoach right now, you've said recently, you know, up until sort of really running the rural bus network, you've had little sort of engagement with officers. I've seen figures, we spend more with Stagecoach even before you tendered the rural network than we did with Grant Palmer during. So actually, to say you didn't have much engagement with officers worries me in the first instance, because actually I think if we're giving lots of money to an operator, we probably should be talking to you on a regular basis. I can, you know, also understand that, you know, we've been through some changes with the rural network. I represent a ward which is covered by the rural network. I have to say, first of all, I'm very pleased to see the Stagecoach 25 run with, I think, the right size bus running on it as well when you run it. I'm also incredibly pleased that actually Grant Palmer managed to provide a very good bus service for my residents as well. And actually, there seems to be some coordination in timing, which actually gives residents bus service we want. I'd love to see more coordination from our officers working with you guys to create a proper Bedford bus network. And a question for both of you, and it's a question I would ask, both operators, I will ask Uno as well. Considering we're not the only local authority you deal with, so obviously as Stagecoach East to be operating over into Huntingdonshire, you'll be operating into South Cambs, into Cambridge as well. I don't think you go much further west other than the X5 you run out to Oxford. Obviously, Grant Palmer, you operate in Central Beds, you operate in Luton, you again operate over in Cambridgeshire. I work in Gamlingay. I'm passed by one of your buses every time I go for my lunch, which is really nice to see. But when you look at Bedford Borough and you compare us to the other local authorities you deal with, do you feel Bedford Borough acts as a proactive transport authority, or are they simply there to administer grants? Who engages with you better? Is Bedford Borough one of your best local authorities to engage with? Or do you find the other local authorities around us better? And please be honest, there isn't a wrong answer to this. I've got some follow-up questions after this.
Yes, I suppose just to clarify, when I say we don't engage as much as officers, I suppose there's things that we engage over, like the same for Grant Palmer with your ECTS and various things like that. But there wasn't the regular catch-ups maybe around your tendered network, which kind of force an additional level of engagement around we're operating your network on your behalf. We have regular engagements with the team regarding, you know, punctuality and suggestions that we might, you know, have you thought about doing this with the route because it might improve things. So that's an additional level of engagement that we've had now over the last few years that maybe we didn't have before. But we generally always engage with network changes. You know, we're thinking about doing this. If we need to withdraw services, if we need to change services, if we need to do that, we'll engage regularly with officers. So I think I've covered the first point, I mean, if not. In terms of the engagement from Bedford in comparison to other areas, you're certainly not by far the worst. So you'll be pleased to hear. So we cover quite a few local authority areas. For me personally, from Suffolk all the way through to Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Hertfordshire, Central Beds, Luton, to name a few, Cambridgeshire obviously. So I think the engagement from officers in Bedford is pretty good with the limited resources they have. I think we need to be mindful that you're a relatively small unitary authority. Your team doesn't have the same resource level as somewhere like Hertfordshire that has a very much larger area, much more resource in the public transport team. So I think for the resource level that Bedford have, I would say that the engagement with officers is good from my point of view.
Obviously, Thomas, same question.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. It was last year that I believe Councillor Royden asked for an update on young persons' discounted fares. That scheme hasn't progressed. In Central Bedfordshire, it's been running for 18 months. In Central Bedfordshire in 2024, there was a significant housing development which lost its bus service. A replacement was procured and up and running using BSIP funds. Similar kind of demographic to the Hillgrounds estate, which is currently unserved. When we look at opportunities to work together, I do not, at this point, understand where the BSIP funds have been spent, either capital or revenue funding. There's been no clarity, there's been no position. As councillors, we should know, so you should know exactly what those funds have gone towards and what support has been given to the network. We've seen good growth in other areas by working together. We have authorities which have very small numbers of officers, even smaller than Bedford Borough, through to, as Charlton has said, areas like Hertfordshire, which are geographically significantly bigger and have a number of towns to them and have larger departments. The frustration being that there have been a number of projects which we've engaged upon which have had no progress to them. These are projects which we believe could have a real impact on residents in this borough, the provision of bus services, discounted fares, engagement on multi-operator ticketing, and there is no response.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. It is obviously, I think, quite interesting. Obviously, it's sad the UNO can't be here tonight. They've given us a good response, and it is interesting to see that all three of you as operators in Bedford Borough encounter very similar issues, and some of that will be down to a lack of bus prioritisation. I think we've possibly had policies, the council, in the last couple of years which have done real damage to our bus network through initiatives which have had to be withdrawn. And actually, the problem is, it's had that lasting effect. It certainly would have had an effect on the services Stagecoach were operating and operating commercially. I mean, coming back slightly to the engagement point, I do wonder if we, as a council, had engaged better with Stagecoach on your commercial services, we wouldn't have been hit with quite such, I would describe it, an earthquake of cuts to our bus services, because we could have been talking more, better and earlier as to how we could deal with things. And actually, hopefully, you would have had a response. Because something that I notice is I go to Cambridge and you operate the same, you're the same bus company over there. You've got some really beautiful buses in Cambridge. My partner lives in Rugby. I go to Rugby quite often. Now, that is run by Stagecoach Midlands rather than Stagecoach East. The buses in Rugby are fantastic. They're electric, they're modern, and all we tend to see in Bedford is cascaded buses. And generally, I'm quite sad, I'm on various bus Facebook groups, and generally it's photographs of the buses which come to Stagecoach around here, then they're photographed them because they're now being taken out of service. We're seeing the 06 plates buses now coming out of service, but I've seen them running around Bedford. I don't see them running around the other towns in the area, which tells me Bedford just doesn't get the investment. And I can't work out why, because we're not, yes, we are a fairly small authority, but the reality is there are other authorities out there who are managing to work with operators. You know, UNO said, and I appreciate Hertfordshire is a far bigger council than Bedford. I'm not going to try to make that, but you know, they've worked with Hertfordshire Council and the government to procure 22 brand new electric buses. It would be great if we worked with you to procure new electric buses. You know, wouldn't it be brilliant for our residents? Now, as Thomas has said, they won't work everywhere. We've got low bridges. Bedford is a very old, you know, it's a historic town. We've got some very rural areas, but having the right buses to the right place would be really nice, I think. With that, there is a question in here, I promise you. I have rambled a little bit, and I apologise for that. I do need a map at times with regards to that. But I guess a question for you, Stagecoach. If there was suddenly a magic money tree, what improvements could you do for Bedford straight away?
So, I think if there was a magic money tree, I think we'd need to separate out what those improvements look like. So, for example, we could wholesale improve frequencies and improve coverage. However, there is potentially better utilisation of some of that money in bus priority measures and improving journey times, because improving journey times would actually allow us to improve frequencies without adding additional buses, if the improvements are significant enough. And that's really, that's the goose that lays the golden egg. If you can improve journey times, the bus is faster than a car, or at least comparable to a car. It allows us to get from A to B quicker, but allows us to do more with that resource. So we can either improve the frequency from, let's take the ones, from 15 to 12 minutes, getting to that turn up and go frequency, or if we can't quite increase the frequencies because there's not enough buses, we can back extend services a bit further. So for example, let's say they're getting to the town centre 10 minutes quicker than they are today, or we can send it 10 minutes further up the road to create new links, so to North Wing Hospital or things like that. So the journey time is really key to everything we do as bus operators, because that is the goose that lays the golden egg. If you can improve bus journey times, we can do a lot more with the resource we've already got, and or we can improve frequencies with very little cost. In terms of electric vehicles, to touch on the first point, it predates me being with Stagecoach. I was with Arriva, but I worked on Hertfordshire's Zebra bid for bus services. Obviously, we were successful with Cambridgeshire's Zebra bid. So I don't think they're doing further ones, but we could certainly look at potential funding opportunities. I suppose the caveat with electric vehicles is they are quite expensive in terms of the procurement, the infrastructure, the requirements. But yeah, we can certainly work together with officers yourselves to look at potential opportunities to bring electric vehicles into Bedford. In terms of our fleet in Bedford and where we put our new fleet, that is driven somewhat by the passengers and the revenue in those areas. So older vehicles have, to get a bit more complex, older vehicles were cheaper to buy 15 years ago, so their depreciation that they carry is a lot lower than new vehicles. So when you've got a depot that maybe is not performing as well in terms of being able to make a margin, if you was to put newer vehicles into that depot, you're going to compound losses. So that was one of the aims of our network redesign, was to also stimulate growth. So we've increased frequencies on a number of key areas where those main passengers were. So Wentworth Drive has seen a doubling in frequency. The Fours, which is now just the Fours, that is the strongest area of what was that route. So they've seen an increase in frequency from maybe 15 minutes now to every half hour. So that is purely designed to drive growth from passengers. If we can get the growth with slightly less resource, then those returns start coming into a profitable depot. We can then start investing in things like new vehicles. As I said, Stagecoach, as a company, we will not be buying any new diesel vehicles. So as those electric vehicles cascade down into our networks across the country, those newer vehicles will be cascading down. So we don't operate anything lower than Euro 5 currently, which is low emission vehicles. So we don't have anything lower than that. Everything is low emission or ultra low emission. So over the next few years, you will see more ultra low emission vehicles coming into Bedford, just because of our national strategy of we're only going to buy electric vehicles. And we have been for about 2 years now. So hopefully that answers it, but let me know if not.
No, thank you. I do appreciate that. You know, and I'm a little bit of a bus nerd. I'm a bit of a train nerd as well. I like it. I like public transport. One of the things I'm very lucky with is actually I can get a Grant Palmer bus into town on a Friday when I finish work at 4 o'clock, and I can get a Stagecoach bus home. You know, to have had an early evening out in town, and I know I can get a bus, and I know you're about to be taking over the 50 from Stagecoach Midlands, so you know, it's good, and I hope that bus continues to run. With it, out of interest to the two operators who are here, in the last 3 years, how many proposals for bus improvement have you put to Bedford Borough Council, and how many have been acted
on? So, I think if we talk about improvements, again, we need to filter that into two categories. One is your, let's call it infrastructure, for want of a better word, which is your bus lanes, what you do with parking measures, all that kind of stuff. And then the other box will be what we want to improve in terms of services, so the actual bus provision, because they are two very distinct boxes. So in terms of bus lanes, bus provision, I personally have given a few items of feedback. One is that your bus lanes had ULEZ enabled vehicles to use them, and people didn't quite understand at the time what ULEZ was, but because of the expansion in London and the traction that's got in the press, people are far more aware of what cars now are ULEZ, and ULEZ covers quite a lot of cars now. So every year that goes past, the ability for those bus lanes to remain clear is hampered because more and more people's cars are ULEZ now, they can use them. So that was one bit of feedback that we gave in terms of your actual infrastructure. In terms of the free parking, we showed lots of statistics and graphs saying this is impacting our bus services. Please do something. And before it happened, it was please don't do it. It was kind of the messaging from us. In terms of bus provisions, we've submitted a few. I probably can't go into that much detail because they've not gone live, and some of them are still ambitions that we'd want to achieve, and I wouldn't want Tom to start running on on those services that we've got some potential faults for, but certainly, yeah, we have submitted options for improvements to bus services.
Before I come to Thomas's answer, are you finding you're getting traction with those? So you've put them forward, and that's great, and we hear lots about those ideas, there's thoughts to be looked into, but actually, as you as an operator, are you getting traction? Because it's one thing to say, oh, actually, could you do this? You know, your 4 hours free parking is a bad idea. It affects the bus traffic, and it had a horrible effect on bus services. You know, actually make the bus lanes more suitable for buses. Have, bus priority at traffic lights, for example. You put those ideas forward. Do you get the we'll look at it, or do you get actually, yeah, you're right, that's a good idea, we will do it?
From my personal opinion, I think they are being looked at. I don't think they're getting a blanket response of, oh yeah, great, thanks. I'm not really going to look at that. So I think they are being seriously considered, the things that I've put forward. And certainly the changes to Signet tickets and how they operate, and the fact that they hadn't been refreshed for a number of years, that was looked at, and the engagement was positive on that, to get essentially a more reflective ticket of the network. So yeah, they are looked at. I think without speaking for the officers, I think potentially some of the constraints are financial. So it's whether the ability and the funding is there to achieve some of our asks. So I think that is potentially one of the barriers. But as far as my opinion, I think they are considered.
Thank you. Obviously, Thomas.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. We've put a number of proposals to local authorities. In the past couple of years, the government's BSIP funds invited proposals from operators to improve, enhance bus services. Think of an extension to a route that could be popular. The 42 that you will know from Bedford to Toddington was extended in partnership with Central Bedfordshire through to Dunstable, restoring a link through Mid-Beds lost for about a decade, just over a decade and a half. We do these documents to elicit a discussion, to come to officers and say this is what we propose. We produce them for all local authority areas. I'm pleased to say that in other areas we've seen a fantastic response. In Bedford we haven't seen a response to our capital suggestions or our revenue suggestions. When we raise road safety concerns, we don't ever see a forthcoming response. We've raised about the difficulties and challenges at the Wixham's bus gate. We're still waiting on some remedial works. We've raised concerns about the Amptill Road bus lane and about the access to the side streets that come from it. Raised by Charlton, as it's now shared, it's a multi-use lane. It produces several hazards to all who share it. The response to that has been slow, and we haven't seen any meaningful improvement. we do want to work with officers. That's part of why we produce these documents, is to start a discussion. But we do not get a structured response. An example being the River Festival. We've worked in partnership to deliver 744 buses every 15 minutes this weekend from Elstow in partnership with officers. We were asked for a response on fares. I still have yet to have a response to concerns that they'd offered about a concession to particular people. The festival's on Saturday. It's another missed opportunity. I've cited the young person's card scheme, which went to a report, which had no further action. We've cited our proposals in Hillgrounds. We put proposals for Putney, Woodside. We do not get a response.
Thank you. My apologies, Chair. One of the things I do notice is in Bedford Borough compared to, say, some of the other areas around us, there isn't the same cross-operated ticketing available. I believe we used to have it in Bedford. You used to be able to buy a ticket which you could use on Grant Palmer, on Uno, and on Stagecoach. And actually, as we are seeing a change to bus operators occurring, particularly in the villages I represent, where we're served by both Stagecoach and Grant Palmer, I know residents do really bemoan the fact we don't have cross-operator ticketing. What could make that happen? I mean, would both of you, and our Una's not here to answer the question, would both operators who are here, would you welcome the opportunity to have cross-operator ticketing? I can't say that very well. And actually, what does the Borough Council need to do to help enable that to happen? Because that could be I think that could be a really easy win for residents.
In short, you do currently have it. There's only 2 operators in it, which is us and Uno. It has been updated 2 years ago now, from memory. So it has a slightly refreshed terms and conditions, because there was a challenge with it, and Tom will allude to why Grant Palmer not part of it. But one of our challenges, and we nearly pulled out of it, was that there was no mechanism for price adjustment in there, and actually it hadn't been refreshed or changed for a number of years, so the Signet ticket was significantly lower than our commercial product. So that's refreshed now, and there's essentially a mechanism in place whereby in the start of a financial year, so April, the price will be increased or can be increased, and it's a differential between the highest commercial equivalent ticket, so whether that's us, Uno, Grant Palmer, whoever has the highest equivalent ticket, there's a differential for the multi-operator ticket mechanism, just to make sure that we don't get into a situation again where it's left for, probably about 5 or 6 years without catching up to the market and end up undercutting significantly the commercial tickets. In terms of what more can be done, I suppose quite a bit more. What would it take? It's relatively easy to achieve. The only caveats with it, because it's multi-operator, it needs to be led by the authority from a competition point of view. So me and Tom can't sit down and come up with a multi-operator ticketing system. We could, but there's a lot of red tape in it. If it's led by the local authority, it takes that competition element away from us and just safeguards that everything's above board. So we could do a lot more. We could put in, a youth fair of sorts. We could make suggestions as to what we think would be something good to go down the lines of. There are some good schemes and there are some challenging schemes in other areas. And myself and Tom will probably be able to say, don't do what they did. Kind of look more what this one is. It's a lot more successful. Again, if you're looking at discounting multi-operator ticketing, so for example, let's take the Cambridgeshire Tiger ticket, which is £1. Just to add on to that comes with a significant cost. Cambridgeshire is a bit more because they've scoped out to people under the age of 25. So that actually eats into your adult revenue, so that could be very expensive. But certainly for discounted child tickets in isolation, we could do that. As I say, and the challenge is that It will take a little bit of investment if you wanted to do that, but we can work in partnership, we can make suggestions, we can come up with proposals based off of best practice we see in other areas. But I'll hand over to Tom.
Thank you for your question. We participate fully in the Luton scheme, the hip-hop scheme. It's been incredibly successful. It was actually set up by operators with little initial engagement with the local authority. They came on board with BSIP funding, and they've been subsidising the cost because they see the benefit to their residents. It's £14.50 to buy a weekly ticket, and that is anything across Houghton Regis, Dunstable and Luton. There are challenges with multi-operator ticketing. We were part of the Signet scheme. It's well documented that we left. One of our frustrations is the zone for the Signet scheme was changed without consultation. We cannot participate in a multi-operator ticketing scheme where 1 week a village is in, 1 week a village is out. That affects our fare structure, that affects our customer communications, that affects our revenue. At the moment, John, in an area like Bedford, multi-operator ticketing is a little bit of a challenge because of the national fare cap, where because fares are capped at £3, offering a concession on top of those generally needs some level of support or service from the local authority. There's also a couple of challenges around the delivery of the ticket itself, making sure it's consistent. One of the benefits of the Luton scheme is it comes out as a printed ticket, you scan a barcode and away you go. And you do that whether you get on a centre bus, an Arriva or a Grand Palm bus, preferably a Grand Palm bus. The benefit of that is it's an easy to use product. The challenge we found with Signet was it was bungled. The map was wrong. The information at roadside was incorrect. The zone was extended, shrunk, the price went up and down. We can't participate in a scheme where the particulars of the ticket are changed without consultation. It needs to be as Charlton has demonstrated, it needs to be a scheme with fair reimbursement for operators, good marketing at street and roadside for customers, and a clearly defined area that it would apply to.
Thank you. I really appreciate that explanation, and I will let other people speak in a moment. It is heartening to have bus operators sat here who are talking about actually what could be done, what could be growth. I think, I will ask you a question. Do you all agree that actually you'd really like the officers to engage with you, you would like the council to engage with you, to take forward some of the ideas you've got to actually benefit the residents of Bedford? That is my final question, Chair.
The key to a good bus service is partnership. It's the partnership of the bus operator and the partnership of the local authority. We've demonstrated that in other local authority areas, that when we work together, we can do great things. I started off this evening talking about some of my passenger growth. It's fantastic because it's been achieved in partnership. We've taken over operation of Service 41, working in partnership with neighbouring authorities. To deliver a partnership, it needs to be fair. We contribute, we invest in the town, we create jobs. We need to see something from Bedford in return. It's got to be a partnership where both of us give and ultimately improve the town's public transport offering.
Yeah, I suppose it's just to echo that response from Tom. It's probably worth noting that whilst we are competitors on paper, we don't really compete with Grant Palmer as such. We're very aware that as a smaller operator, they've very much got their market and they can operate some services that we can't, which is why they've stepped in on a couple of occasions and operate routes that used to be stagecoach routes, in part because they've got smaller overheads and a smaller cost base. So working with small operators is something we do nationally, and we do in multiple areas within East. So the collaboration and the will to collaborate is there, and if, in all honesty, anything is possible. So we can make suggestions, you could ask for us to look at things and make suggestions, and the cooperation is kind of already there, but the art of the possible is we could do anything. There's going to be a few caveats to that. One's going to be political will for some measures, some might be cost of some measures, so but we could certainly work with officers, work with Grant Palm, work with UNO to come up with suggestions and arts of the possible. The final step of delivering those will come down to, political will cost, various things that sometimes limit the ability of partnerships to do certain projects. But yeah, it would be great to work in partnership and come up with some schemes that really benefit residents in Bedford.
Thank you. Councillor White and then Councillor Oliver and then Councillor Sira.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank all of you for coming tonight. It's been really interesting and really grateful for you coming to speak to us. I use the buses probably 5-6 days a week, not as an alternative as for transport. It's my only mode of transport at the moment. So I think I sort of can talk about it as a bus user. This is for Stagecoach. This is like two things, not to do with the bus routes. So two really random questions. On your single deckers, when it was over 30 degrees last week, obviously we're experiencing this weather, which is not the norm for us, but it looks like we're going to be heading that way if we don't do something. On the single deckers, on the lower deck, the back seat, I sat down and it was over 30, and it's not my age, and I thought to myself, I know it's hot, but there's something wrong here. And the hot air that was coming out from underneath the seat was absolutely, I couldn't believe it. And at first I thought, my God, the heating's on. And then I thought, I'm not going to complain because everyone, the bus driver, everyone was stressed and what have you. Then I read on social media that it's not actually the heater, it's something to do with the airflow of the bus. So that's my first question. Can you tell me what that is and why it is when we're experiencing such heat, and is there anything that can be done about it?
Yeah, so essentially, depending which bus we've got, different models have different things installed within them. But there are air circulatory systems and there is heating. So heating will generally switch off about the end of spring. So this is a manual process, just go in and kind of switch off. Turn a knob for all intents and purposes to switch off the heating. So the driver hasn't got any control over whether the heating's on or off. But what it will then do is essentially blow cold like you would in your car. The caveat with that, if anyone probably doesn't, but if anyone remembers driving a car before air conditioning was a thing, is when you're in slow traffic, those fans can feel quite hot because the airflow isn't coming through. So when the bus is moving, the air starts flowing, the fan kind of should cool it. It's not air conditioning, but essentially a fan system. The challenge is when you're stationary, you're not moving or in traffic like you would in a car 20 years ago. Those fans can feel quite warm, and then you start moving again and it kind of feels a bit cooler. We've got other buses not in Bedford that have got a form of air conditioning, but again, the way that works, they cool it 3 degrees cooler than the ambient temperature outside. So if the ambient temperature is 30 degrees, you're still only going to be 27 degrees. I think the update is all of our electric vehicles now have full-on air conditioning. So sort of full air conditioning similar to your car. So as our fleet improves, those vehicles are coming into our fleet. They will have air conditioning. I think the challenge has been that the extreme weather is extreme, and it might be continuing, and over a few years it will become more prevalent. But kind of like the railways, to invest in extreme weather, it's kind of a bit of a challenge to say, well, we'll fit everything with air conditioning and we'll take a 20% increase in fuel costs for 2 weeks of the year. But certainly extreme weather seems to be becoming a bit more prevalent. So it kind of is not a reaction to that because it's already happening with our electric vehicle procurement. They all come with air conditioning because it's more efficient way the batteries work. So yeah, at the moment there's not much we can do, but as the coming years come, there's already a mechanism in place whereby temperatures on buses will be more palatable.
That's brilliant, because obviously you've got a range of there was like young babies on the bus, older people, but I just know now not to sit in that seat, so at least we know that. So the second question is to do with the heat as well. On your double-decker buses, last week it was over 30 again, and a wheelchair user was on the left-hand side of the bus in the allocated place. Now, somebody else tried to get on with a wheelchair, and they wanted to sit on the opposite side where you've got the 3 seats that fold up, but they weren't allowed to because apparently there's no backrest for them. So, and the rest of the bus was nearly empty. So my question is, cost-wise, what would it cost to put that backrest there so that you can enable disabled users to use that bus, not just one person? Because in that heat, this person was already distressed. They didn't want to get off and wait for the next bus, and we ended up having to transfer this person into a chair, which was not very dignified for them, but it was their choice because they didn't want to wait. But just that smaller adjustment, I know it's a cost, would have enabled that person to stay in the chair. So that's my second question. That's the second question. I've got one after that, if that's okay.
Yeah, so in terms of the wheelchair space, that is a legal definition of essentially how many people can be carried on the bus. So let's take it to I'm trying to think of something that's similar to compare it to. But essentially, to change that, we can't just take out the seats and put in a wheelchair space. We have to re-register that with the DVSA as a change to the vehicle. So, and it's a safety critical element. So some vehicles potentially could be retrofitted with a second wheelchair space, but it's not as easy as just making one. We'd have to, it's like if we was to change the capacity of a vehicle, it has to be re-registered legally with a new capacity. Yeah, so we could do it. Not all vehicles have enough space because then you need to make sure you've got a certain amount of aisle space for people to kind of evacuate. And there are some parameters around why we could or couldn't do it. One thing to note is our electric vehicles that we're procuring, and the ones in Cambridge, do have 2 wheelchair spaces. So it's one of those where it's coming, and it will come with slightly newer spec vehicles. We were able to spec with, they're built and designed to have 2 wheelchair spaces to make them more accessible.
Well, that's good because I can feed back to the resident now, and obviously by explaining that, I know now it's not just a thing of putting the backrest on and everything's okay. My last question is something that you touched on about safety. Now, I didn't know, as a bus user, when it gets dark at night in the winter, it's not very nice. It's not very nice anyway during the day, but for safety reasons, I didn't know that your drivers were all trained. If somebody feels they are being followed, that they can approach the driver for assistance. Is there any way that either as a council or as a bus operator that we could get that publicised? Because I think in this day and age, I think it's crucial that not just females, anybody, if they're worried or if they're being followed or anything, that they can actually go to the bus driver and say, look, I'm worried that I'm being followed. And I just think it's something that we should be not only telling your passengers, but, you know, sort of it's something that we should be proactive in.
Yeah, so on that, we've done quite a bit of promotion. If anyone reads trade presses, I think we've won 3 industry awards now for that, BAA. We also then post those on our social media feeds when we win an award. Also, I'm not sure if it's still on because this was quite a while ago we rolled this out, but Jay will probably correct me if I'm wrong, we did have on the front of the bus and on the side of the bus, it used to change the destination and what is said to say this bus is a safe space.
It's still there, yeah.
Is it still there? So we have that on, next time you catch a bus, just have a look. If you see it, it will change, so you might not, as it pulls out, it might not be up there, but certainly if you get off, have a look on the side, have a look on the front, see if it's there. It will periodically flash, this bus is a safe space, if it's got a little heart on it as well. So as they're going around the town, people will see this bus is a safe space. But we can certainly work with you if you wanted to publicise it on your channels. We've got literature already designating, telling people about it because we promote ourselves.
Yeah, that's something definitely I will look out for because I didn't, as a council, I didn't know about it, and that's something that I will publicise and tell my residents about because I think it's like really important. Yeah, right, thank
Thank you, Councillor White. Thank you, Councillor Oliver, to correct me. Councillor Royden is first, and then you. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Royden.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Chair. You probably realise that this is one of the most important subjects for our residents, full stop. And we are currently in the worst public transport crisis this borough has ever faced. So we've had a lot of complacency so far. This is really serious. It's the most important thing in many of our residents' lives. Some of our residents bought homes because they were next to a bus stop. And as a consequence of the cuts that you've just made, they now find that they've got a whole road with redundant bus stops. Empty bus stops with bus shelters, raised curbs, spent a fortune on them, and they're just done away with that. I think I have to applaud you, Stagecoach. You've done a wonderful job tonight of diplomatic restraint, walking on eggshells, trying not to say anything too detrimental about the council. Thomas, I think, has been a little bit more frank. Perhaps that's because, and when I've looked at the figures, and you know, I keep getting figures from council officers and being told that they're confidential. I'm grateful to the monitor officer who's told me that none of the figures, none of the financial figures are confidential. Only bus passenger numbers are confidential. So all the figures that I've been given and told, we can't share this, commercially sensitive, it's all false. And looking at the figures, I mean, there's forecast 4.6 million funding that this council's giving at the end of this year, for the end of this year. 4.8 million last year. The lion's share of that goes to Stagecoach. Now, the council often tells me, oh, it's not that we can do it to private company, they operate privately. But actually, there's a whole lot of stuff that we can do as a council, which we're clearly not doing. Because we're not engaging with you in the way that we should, for instance, over Section 106 funding, which is what Grant Palmer have been talking about. But all the money that we give, now it's mentioned about BSIP funding. Members of the public won't have a clue what BSIP funding is. But essentially, the government gives a shed load of money to the council to spend on buses. This is where the 4.8 million comes from. And Thomas said he doesn't know where it goes. I can tell Thomas now, because I can tell some of it, because the difficulty that you get getting information out of the council is one that I share as well. Because if you can't get the data, neither can I. And I put a question to the monitor officer at full council, last council meeting, and I'm still waiting for that information now. Councillor Headley said £300,000 of government BSIP funding was just swallowed into the council's accounts in February 2025. Just swallowed into the accounts. And he asked a question about that. We still haven't got an answer. We don't know what's happened to that £300,000, apart from the fact that it's helping prop up the failing bankrupt council. We've found out that we were given 4.148 million of bus service improvement money last year. Capital funding, this is not revenue funding, capital funding. And hasn't been spent. Only £40,000 of it has been spent. It's been sat there in an account, doing nothing, whilst we face the worst bus crisis in this council's history. Now, I've heard from Grant Palmer that you could buy 4 buses for that. And instead, the people, and I'm going to come to the Stagecoach question now, because I'm in Brickhill, and of course, because you cut the services on the Kinbottom Road, a lot of my residents are now feeling, how do we get to the hospital, all that kind of stuff. Putnow's a bus desert. But you're getting all this money, and Stagecoach, I know you're a private company, but you're making a lot of money in profit, Stagecoach. It's not as if, you're going bust or anything. There's a lot of money, and I think we feel as if we're being, I hate to use the expression, taken for a ride. Do you have any remorse over what's happening in Putney with the lack of buses?
So yeah, there's quite a few points there. You'd have to check with the officers, but I feel the £4 million figure you quoted for payments to operators probably includes your ENCTS. Well, must include your ENCTS because we're not getting £4 million from Bedford. But so that's kind of ring-fenced to a degree to pay for those users that have ENCTS passes. In terms of Putney, withdrawing services for us is always a last resort. So we do not want to withdraw services, full stop. I want to grow depots. I want depots to run more buses next year than they ran this year, and that to continue on and have a growing business, because selfishly my job depends on that. So that's why I want that to happen. We are largely a commercial business. So as a East total, 70%, or about 75%, slightly higher, of all of our revenue comes from fare-paying passengers or passenger-derived revenue. Some of that is offset by CPCA topping up for Tiger passes for the £1 single, but it's still passenger-derived revenue. So if people don't get on the bus, 75% of everything we get in terms of revenue comes from passengers. So passengers are key to everything we do. The challenge and I take your point that we must be making lots of profit. There's been a lot of challenges in the industry over the last probably 2 years, but we had COVID, we come out of COVID, everywhere saw quite a big growth from COVID. The government did some initiatives like the fare cap, which initially was successful and a welcome change for bus operators. It's now become a bit of a challenge because it's limited our ability to yield more as costs have increased. We've had fuel crises, we've had national insurance rises which have hit bus operators quite hard. We are a high labour industry, so for every bus you see on the road, that's about 3 drivers for that one bus throughout the day. So we are a very high labour industry. That bill for the national insurance increase was significant for bus operators versus, say, a tech company that doesn't have that high labour cost. So yes, well, in Bedford, we were facing a loss-making depot. The depot was not making a profit. Now, you could say, yeah, but Stagecoach make a profit in Manchester, in London. Well, we're not... Legally, we'd be in a very precarious position if we were to maintain a loss-making network over the top of a smaller operator like Grant Palmer, because that is unfair. We can't really do that. There is a different onus on larger operators when it comes to competition, and you could take a business decision and say, well, let's take some of the profits we're making in Manchester and keep Bedford running at a loss because it keeps out the smaller operators and keeps our market share and things might improve in the future. We can't. That's a bit of a... you get frowned upon by competition law if we did that. Like I said, Tom and Grant Palmer, they've got their place in the market, and we're well aware of that they are able to operate some things that we just can't make financially viable. So I take your point that, yeah, but you're making some profits elsewhere, but we've got to look at the depot in isolation, and the infrastructure and the capital input from us into Bedford is driven solely by Bedford and East as an opco. So we were facing a loss-making depot. We had a loss-making depot. There was a number of routes that have declined for a number of reasons, some of which we touched on already today. We went through this in depth. We presented options to keep services to those areas that were withdrawn to Bedford Borough. For whatever reason, they were not acted upon or not able to be procured. That's fine, that's a council decision, but we can run buses, or Tom or Uno, any 3 of us, or any other operator, can run buses wherever you want to run a bus. The challenge is, if it's not commercially viable, then it will need to be funded through some means. So we rely on, for the majority of our network, except your tendered North Bedfordshire network, of fare-paying passengers, people getting on the bus using fares. To a degree, even ENCTS, which was in that figure, is reliant on people using the bus. If less people use their pass, that ENCTS pass, that figure that you pay decreases. So it's reliant on people using it. It's not a blanket payment each year that we get and it doesn't change. It's reliant on usage of your ENCTS pass. And you can rightly so, that will decrease if less people in the borough are using it. So passenger-derived revenue and the passengers being able to pay for the cost of the service is, the heart of what we do. We can run a service wherever you want to run a service, and you can put a tender out to put a bus in tomorrow that goes through Putney and wherever you want it to go, within reason, as long as it's not competing with commercial services or some other parameters. But you could do whatever you want, really, within reason. The caveat is that to expect a commercial operator to run that service at a loss is probably an unfair expectation. But yeah, in terms of Putney, it was a last resort, and we put plans for all of the areas that now don't have a stagecoach service to maintain these.
Thank you for that answer. I appreciate you're not a loss-making company. You don't want to be a loss-making company. But you can understand the frustration of our residents when you've put forward proposals, when we've got all kinds of levers that we can pull, including financial ones, and we still can't get our heads together to keep a bus running in a community like Putney, serving areas like Brickhill. It is devastating, and our residents will be extremely disappointed by this. Thank you for your answer, though. And we are trying to be courteous tonight, I hope you, hope you don't feel as if we're getting at you in any shape or form.
Thank you, Councillor Ryden, Councillor Oliver, and then Councillor Searer.
Thank you. I'll just slip in one extra for Stagecoach. I listened carefully to what you're saying, and it chimes with a reply that I saw to a resident from Stagecoach saying, well, why have you cut the service around Hillgrounds Road? And it's because a lot of the users around Hillgrounds Road, I guess, are free bus pass users, and it's not commercially viable. It's a well-used bus, despite what your figures say. It's a well-used bus, but mostly free bus. And I read that you'd approached the council before Christmas saying, if they could be subsidised, we can save the service. Is that correct?
Yes, so the conversations about our network change started quite early on, way before we put any finalised plans through to, and before we had the meeting here. So before Christmas we was having discussions, look, we are facing challenges for the reasons we outlined on these services in these areas in Bedford town. You know, we can put proposals to you that are going to avoid service withdrawals. And then we went through a planning stage of coming up with a new network, of looking at those passenger numbers where they were and saying, right, we don't just want to make withdrawals, cuts. We need to get stimulate some growth. So the plan was to shave a little bit of cost to bring the depot back in line to where it needs to be, but reinvest most of the changes to improve frequencies, which is what we did. So extending the 5 up to Wentworth Drive and improving their frequency, because that 7 service that went through Putney, about 12% of passengers actually got on in Putney, but the vast majority of passengers got on Wentworth Drive. So that's taken right. That's the spot where the passengers are. They're currently getting an hourly service. If we can increase that service to every half hour by linking it with the 5, we can maybe stimulate some growth. Equally with what we did with the 4s, what we did with the W2, which is a brand new route linking through Wixham's and touching into the retail park. So it wasn't just, let's just cut and reduce our cost and revenue base to an attainable level, because we can't go much lower. We've got a certain amount of overheads as a depot that we can't go much lower. We need to stimulate growth. We can't just cut. So that was the overarching aim, was to try and stimulate growth as well as bringing costs in line to where they needed to be. So yes, we started having discussions pre-December around we're facing challenges. These are the areas we're facing challenges in. What can be done? If you've got any, funding you could help with, just bridging gaps for a certain period of time. So those conversations were being had well in advance of making changes.
Thank you. I'll ask my question now to whichever officer cares to pick this one up. Just over 2 weeks ago, after three petitions with more than 2,000 signatures were presented, and after an hour-long debate, a very passionate debate where lots of people, lots of councillors contributed, a lot of anger, a lot of distress in the room, and representing that we've had from residents. Full council voted unanimously, which was a rare thing, unanimously on a motion with regard to bus services. So what I'd like to know is what actions have been taken so far to address the 5 points of that resolution. And to be fair, some of the officers were not in the room that night, and the bus operators were lucky that they weren't sat here for nearly 5 hours that night either. So the points that were resolved were to liaise with all bus operators in the area to produce a network that serves our residents, not just commercial gain. Engage constructively with bus operators to provide a frequent replacement bus service for those areas which have lost them. Work with local schools and colleges to get pupils back onto public transport rather than individual schools using private contractors. Publish what the bus service improvement money awarded to Bedford Borough by central government and any other bus funding has been spent on in the interest of transparency. Engage with ward councillors regarding all changes, improvements and decisions concerning bus services in their areas before any changes are implemented. Thank you. Don't fight over it.
It's certainly work in progress. You know, this has been a significant challenge to all of us. You know, I'm not going to go into some of the details here, but, you know, we heard about a money tree being mentioned by Councillor Abbott a few minutes ago, or a bit of a time ago. Putting on buses or saving buses, as Stagecoach said, it's not £50,000, it's not £100,000. You know, a bus to purchase, and as we hear tonight about a driver and things like that, it's £250,000 upwards. You know, these are significant costs. With any service that is stopped, to then obviously look to use money to try and plug that gap is a significant challenge to us in the current times. So that work is still ongoing. It's not the case it hasn't stopped. We're still exploring a number of different options with the operators. Only yesterday, myself and Joanne had quite a lengthy discussion with Dave Shelley from Grant Palmer. I think certainly me and Joe found that productive. I think, without taking words from David's mouth, I think it was a useful opportunity to sort of David to understand where we are, because I think some of the points, and I'm happy to come back to them, that Thomas has highlighted is, I think there's a little bit misunderstanding there of all the processes we have to go through as a council, and the time that takes. These are not simple steps. You know, we're in very different times now. Officers are working tirelessly to try and push stuff through, but quite a lot of the time, things like the River Festival gets rejected by the spend management panel we have set up in the council. Now, that needs to be fed back to Thomas so he can understand that, but I know Sarah here and Gemma have been working tirelessly to try and answer some of the questions that the spend management panel have thrown back, because they've directed that money being spent on that particular option for the River Festival, and that's still ongoing. It probably isn't going to happen now because the spend panel have made a decision, much to, you know, the upset of my officers, because we've tried very hard to push these type of things through, and that's often the case. The same with some of these opportunities we've been given. You know, exceptional amount of work's been done by both Stagecoach and Grant Palmer and Uno as well, and other people, trying to find ways in which we can plug them gaps that have been left by the reductions of these routes. It's very challenging. We've got all sorts of regulations we have to meet. You know, some of that's perhaps not so clear to the operators, but we are handcuffed in spending any types of money. We have procurement regs, we have spend management panels, we have gateway reports. you know, it takes forever to get things through. And that's not done on purpose. That's to make sure the council's protected, to make sure we are abiding by our contractors' standing orders and things like that, and make sure that we're treating everybody fairly. We are liaising with all bus operators. That's continuing. It has done since, obviously, we were aware of the restrictions that Stagecoach's been making. There's been constant communication. Everybody's been involved throughout this process. In relation to schools and colleges, it is a separate team, as the councillor mentioned earlier, but we do work very closely with that team. That's not to say, as Joe says, that there's certainly a lot more that we feel we can all do by working more closely with that other area of the council to provide benefits. We want these routes to be sustainable. We don't want to cut routes. No, none of us come in to this building and come to work for this council to cut services. It breaks our hearts, as well as it breaks residents. It breaks officers' hearts to actually cut services and sit here and hear what's being said. You know, this is not officers being awkward. This is the barriers and the reality we have to deal with. The costs, you know, the costs are massive to put on buses. So we are, Councillor Oliver, working really hard to try and find these solutions. We've not, you know, same with the portfolio holder for environment. You know, Councillor Gribble works with us, you know, every single day on mostly to do with the bus stuff. That's the major topic at the moment. That overtakes everything else. That's how much effort is going into this. This is not something we just sweep under the carpet thinking it'll go away. We know it won't go away, and that's why we're putting the effort in. I do take back some of the feedback and stuff that both operators, and I'm thanking both very much for their honesty and feedback. Yes, there are elements we've got to improve, but I think some of this is around the communication side, that perhaps they don't understand some of the restrictions and stuff we're working under, and we need to be better at communicating that and making sure we can perhaps both tailor our working relationships to make sure that we can get the best from working through them restrictions and stuff. There is no secret into what we've spent and what we've had on the BSIP. There's nothing confidential in that anybody can go onto the website, the government websites, pull that information. You know, we can put that on our website if it's not already. There's nothing to hide in that. We have had discussions with operators about what we can and can't do, but we haven't got this magic money tree. That's the real sad fact is, we'd like to have electric buses, we'd like to have priority signalling and stuff, and we are working on some of them capital schemes and trying to drive through faster routes for the buses to improve the connectivity and things like that. So I just wanted to give you assurance. I know I've just rabbled on a long time, Councillor Oliver, but I want to give you some assurances that we are really working hard on this, and I do use the word upsetting again to us as officers, because this isn't, you know, the climate we would like to be in, and we are doing everything possible, even though quite clearly people are, you know, challenging that, and that's rightly so, and I do take that feedback, and I will make sure that I discuss that with the team and improve whatever we can going forward, and the communication with yourselves as well.
Thank you, Paul. And I'm sorry to throw you under the bus, metaphorically, but communication is key, especially with ward councillors affected, because then we can pass on information we gain to residents. And that's why tonight has been so helpful on lots of fronts. So I thank everybody involved.
Thank you, Councillor Sira, for waiting. And after that, Councillor Abbott, and then we move on to the comments.
Oh, it's rattling when I want to talk. No, thank you, Paul. I just want to say, you know, genuinely, I think we all felt, well, I certainly felt your passion, and you know, I'm extremely grateful for what you've just said and the way you've explained it and the transparency that you've allowed us to have this evening. I know it can't be easy being in the position you're in, so thank you. Just in regards to, I'm just going to put this back here because obviously it's doing something. I just wanted to come back on a point about free parking, Charlton, that you mentioned. I understand the desire to encourage greater use of public transport, but for many of my residents in Wye Boston Ward, so Wye Boston Ward, I'm not sure if you know, is in North Beds, and Wye Boston Ward in particular is one of the largest span wards. I've got about 8 parish councils and they are really far from each other. You know, you can't just get anywhere by simply saying, oh, I'll walk up the road, like you can in Bedford, for instance, if you just want to go into town centre. So it's just not a realistic option. So we represent some of the most rural communities in the borough where bus services are either very infrequent or don't operate at the times people need them. For many families, older residents and young people, the car isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. That's why initiatives such as free parking have been so valuable for our rural communities. My question is, what plans do the bus operators, and this is a question for both of you, both companies, what plans do the bus operators have to improve the frequency, reliability and coverage of the services in rural North Bedfordshire, and how can we work together to ensure residents genuinely have a viable alternative before measures are introduced that could disadvantage those who have no choice but to drive? Now I'm just going to really quickly, as I mentioned, I know you also mentioned that the cost isn't the actual bus itself and it's the driver. But I do wonder, in terms of economics, if you had a driver driving those routes, surely you'd get your money's worth, or at least I'd hope you would. But again, then I can go back to something that Alice was mentioned, that decisions have been taken and they've been made, but we haven't seen any statistics to support those decisions. Now, I know that's a lot of information, so if you answer the initial question, would you like me to repeat it just so there's no confusion? So frequency, reliability and coverage of the services, and how can we help you to achieve that? Or, you know, what can we do? I'll leave it at that and then maybe we can come back if you remember.
So I'll touch on the last point, if I may, before I forget it. So in terms of statistics, if you're talking about the statistics we use to plan our new network, we put quite a comprehensive paper together. I wasn't sure if you was here when we was here last time, but that will be available. Councillors might have it, or your officers might have it. At the time, it was confidentially sensitive because it had quite a lot of passenger numbers and we hadn't registered it yet. So I didn't want Tom getting his hands on it. So that now is obviously, we've done our network redesign, so the officers will be allowed to share that with you. So in there's quite a lot of statistics around where the passengers were, why we're making these decisions on certain things. If it's about other statistics that not relate to us, yeah. But our statistics are in that presentation we put together, and the officers can share that now. In terms of rural services, so rural services are a challenge, and the challenge is volume. So Tom might have a difference of opinion here, but the solution to rural services, particularly very rural areas, is unlocking, it's called total transport. So there's a few things, and Bedford are actually in probably a slightly better position than most local authorities because you've already got a fleet of vehicles that you manage and run. There's probably a greater question going forward for yourselves is whether you continue to manage and run them yourself, or whether you procure that to a third party such as Tom or ourselves to operate on your behalf if you're going to do more with them. So total transport is essentially unlocking trips to rural areas that already exist. The challenge with this is they already exist in silos. So for example, you've got patient transport journeys to rural villages that already exist. You've got home to school transport journeys to rural villages that already exist. So you might have a rural village that's got 4 journeys per day coming towards or into Bedford that could be utilised or maybe are underutilised currently that could be unlocked to be better utilised to provide public access and public transport. So, for example, you take home to school journeys that might have a minibus with 7 children on and may have 5 spare seats. Could you unlock that and offer that to the public and residents in rural areas? And these are those areas where running a commercial bus service is never going to be a viable option. And if it's not a viable option to run it commercially, it's also going to be a very expensive option for the council to tender. So, you know, to be mindful, either it needs to be paid for by the people using the service, or it needs to be paid for by the authority. But as Paul alluded to, buses can be quite expensive, particularly if you're not getting volumes of passengers. So what Total Transport will do, it will unlock existing journeys that are already being made from these very, very rural areas. For areas that are maybe not quite as rural as that, where you can physically get buses to and from, you've got your minibus provision that you currently use for school transport. As I think Joanne was alluding to earlier, there is probably a rationalisation piece where you look at that provision and what could be done with that to enhance and use that as your answer to rural transport. Now, you may want to view whether that's something that you wanted to do as an authority, or whether you would want somebody, you know, professional, myself or Tom, to put out to tender for somebody to bid on to operate that and make those suggestions on your behalf. But you've got a set of vehicles which are unique to Bedford, which most local authorities don't have. So when we're talking about total transport, this is getting authorities to speak to, like, patient transport, the health sector. It's very difficult to get them to see the benefits of total transport because they're in silos. It's you know, home to school transport, again, it's also a bit of a silo, even though it's transport. So it's about unlocking these journeys to those really rural areas to provide a service of some sort. I think that's the answer for those very rural services, other than tendering services. As I say, we can run buses, or you can run buses, wherever you want to run them, as frequently as you want to run them. The challenge is if there's not enough passengers to pay for the provision of the service, it just needs to be tendered. And, you know, it's an open procurement. Tom can bid for it, I can bid for it, Uno can bid for it, somebody else can bid for it, and run it on your behalf at the best potential value to the authority, although it's still going to be relatively expensive, potentially, for the number of passengers. So you're probably aware there's a passenger subsidy cost, or cost per passenger, for all of your tendered services. There are local authorities that have a ridiculously high cost per passenger, so, but that's the authority's decision. So one authority has a service, I think it's still in operation, that had a cost per passenger of £128. So they decided to continue to run that. That's entirely the authority's decision as a tender. But to put that in perspective, the question is then on the authority, is that best value, or is there other ways of unlocking services from that area, such as total transport, that could make that far more cost effective? Well, at that price, it technically would be cheaper to give every person a personal taxi for their journey, but yeah, that's the authority's decision. It's nothing to do with the bus operators making that decision.
Councillor Sira, you got any other question? Or
do you mind if I just form a response to the delivery of rural bus services? So we've got a really strong track record of delivering rural bus services for North Beds, and we've recently taken on operation of Service 41, which is probably one of the most rural commercial bus services in the borough. Lots of fields, lots of lovely green acres and pastures coming through. We've taken a view with that service that will simplify the timetable, so it operates to a coordinated hourly service throughout the day. We've sped journeys up, which makes them more attractive, so diversions and curtailments via certain villages are removed. And we've invested a lot in roadside marketing, so if you go throughout the patch, you'll see a bright red bus stop, loads of information, and if you go into the corner shop, I can guarantee you can pick up a printed leaflet, and particularly in Turvey and the wee corner shop just before Lavendon. It's that localism that really helps in its connecting with the rural community. We have a strong track record in Wootton, where we've recently provided a replacement service 53, again by providing a direct bus service. One of the challenges that Bedford has is in its provision of very rural bus services is the most recent tender round has seen journey length increase exponentially. So if you now live in somewhere like Wilden, the journey length, the journey length in Wilden has increased exponentially. It's an unattractive product, and when that journey length becomes longer and longer and longer, fewer people use it, and it becomes a cycle where the cost to provide it increases. There's challenges in the delivery of rural bus services because of the way that the large tender is formed. There's duplication in the network. If you stand in Harold, there are buses, and Councillor Abbott will challenge this, but there are too many buses to Harold. There is an hourly commercial bus service that provides all of the need. There is no need for a service to run over the top of it. There are ways to engage with operators to provide a northbound service to Rushden at lower cost. There's ways to provide subsidy for places like Stevington, whose current morning departure is at 10:58, which is a fairly late bus. Even I struggle to wake up in the morning, but even I'd struggle to say that's an early morning departure for Bedford. So we need to look at the intricacy. And there are challenges in the delivery of supported services. It's 2056 in 3 minutes' time. The local authority will fund a service 9. They fund evening journeys on late night buses. There will be a commercially operated 2056 journey that runs identically from the village of Shortstown. There is far too much duplication in the current network. We need to look at what is being provided, consider are the evening journeys in the urban environment paying their way. Should that funding be used to support rural areas, to allow everybody a fair and more equal slice of subsidy and access to their service? We would want to work with you though. We've seen really, really good development on Route 41 since we've taken over. We have little route panels, we get people involved. I was at a tea dance in Wootton earlier this week, and I did refuse to dance if anybody wants to find any footage of that. But it's about engagement, and that's the brilliant thing that an SME can bring to those kinds of routes. Is the personal touch. It's a small driving team. So we do want to see better coverage, and the document that's been passed to you outlines our vision that every village in Bedford, be it Bletsoe, which is absolutely, small little hamlet, Risley, all the way through to the bigger towns like Wootton, like Sharnbrook, should have a decent level of service. And I think it's that holistic network view that we've lost sight of. The tendering in isolation, the support, the last-minute response has meant we've degraded our rural network.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that, and I found both of those answers extremely helpful. Is it possible for us to perhaps sit around a table and discuss these options? I don't know if the officers, I would hope they'd like to be a part of this, on how to better establish those routes, especially if you're talking about SMEs, and I agree, you're going to be a little bit more approachable, a little bit more open, with your overheads and so on, and making it feasible both for you and making it practical for the residents, especially in places like Wilden. Wilden's not part of my ward. It used to be, they took it out. But it's going to be extremely helpful, and I appreciate with the platform that we have today and the time that we have today, that's going to be extremely limited. So, are you willing to liaise with me in particular, or anybody else who want to join into the conversation after this, please? Thank you.
In short, yes. We're more than willing to engage and help you think of potential ways to utilise resource, or whether that's monetary resource or your existing bus provision in a more efficient, effective, cohesive way. Happy to do that in conjunction with other operators. I suppose the only caveat to those discussions is we won't be able to discuss our own commercial services. So your tendered network is fine because they're your bus services. We can pass on suggestions for those and thoughts for those, but we wouldn't be able to sit in the room with Tom and discuss our own commercial services and ideas around those just because of competition. Could do it potentially separately. But yeah, we're happy to discuss rural areas that, certainly if they don't have a service, what could be done with total transport. We did a rural bus summit about 4 years ago now, initially aimed at the Cambridgeshire area, where we was looking at exactly that, was those silos, those costs, those patient transports, and trying to get everyone in the room from the various sectors that owned those portfolios to say, look, here's an answer for rural transport. Have you considered maybe unlocking some of this? There wasn't much success from that, but yeah, we're happy to do similar principles with Bedford and trying to better utilise some of your resource, whether it's monetary or bus provision.
Yes, I'm conscious of time. We'd be keen to engage with you, and we recognise the value that councillors can bring, particularly in engagement at ward level. You know your customers because they're your ward, well as I know them as people that get on the bus at 9:30 and let's take them to Bedford for a cup of coffee. So the more we can do, the better.
Amazing, thank you. Really quickly, I know neither of you touched on how you were going to get in touch with me. So can I please leave it to somebody to pass on our details, or vice versa? Is that okay? Thank you very much.
I'm happy to do that, thank you.
Councillor Abbott.
My apologies, I'm not trying to extend this bit too much. I will say, and I have to caveat because I've engaged with Grant Palmer, it is really good to engage with the bus operators. It does work. I've had engagement with Stagecoach as well. In fact, your managing director very kindly met with me when we were looking at the 51 and we had a conversation about buses. I was going to give you a soft lob if required to explain about the cost of operating a big bus to little buses, similar, but you'd already touched on that. Just coming back to the devastating cuts that you did recently, when you proposed these network changes to the Borough Council, who did you meet with in the council to discuss it?
Specifically would be, we met with Joanne, Sarah, a couple of conversations with Paul in terms of data and things around that, so 3 officers behind me.
Give you 10. So, did you not meet with the portfolio holder? Because ultimately the officers are here just to do the bidding of our administration. And certainly none of this tonight has been about kicking our officers, because they can only do what they are told to do. And it is the leadership of this administration who calls that. So I would have thought when you're making a cut like that, did you not meet with the portfolio holder? Did the portfolio holder not want to meet with you? And actually, I know the previous mayor used to meet with the bus operators. Did the mayor not want to meet with you? You were doing something, and I understand for commercial reasons you did it, but you were doing something absolutely devastating to this town. Did the leadership not want to meet with you? Did they not want to have a conversation and say, what can we do to stop this? You know, I would have expected at a minimum that officers would have said, you need to talk to the portfolio holder. And actually, this was such a big cut, I would have expected the mayor to have been involved. So can you tell me, have you had engagement with the portfolio holder over these cuts and what you're looking at? And then, did the mayor have any engagement with you?
I believe so, yes. So the mayor and the portfolio holder would have been either Darren or David, so our managing director or commercial director, rather than myself. So I didn't personally meet with or speak to the mayor or portfolio holder, but I'm pretty sure Darren and David probably did. Portfolio holder behind me, so they can probably confirm either way. And I think it's probably key to touch on, we also met with the full council before we made the final decision as to what we were doing. We highlighted that we've sent proposals for to keep various routes. We actually sent proposals after that full meeting with the council around Putney and the comments we got back from the council. So we took that away and we come up with a proposal for a 7 essentially to maintain a service in Putney that we presented post. So I think in terms of did we engage with anybody, we engaged with as many people as possible, including a full council meeting, which we then took away some feedback from that and put revised proposals for certainly for Putney around maintaining a service and a cost for that.
Okay, I mean, you did come to full council. In fact, if I remember rightly, we were told this is what you were doing. It wasn't really an opportunity for engagement with us. We would love to have been consulted much earlier on with it. I would like to know for certain, not I think so it might be officers, it might be a portfolio holder, who could come back to this committee, please, and let us know which members of the administration, so portfolio holders and mayor, met with you to discuss this devastating cut which happened to our town. Because I think it's really important that people know how seriously our administration took what happened. And I think we should know, as councillors, who met with you, and actually I want to know why if it didn't go to the mayor, why the mayor didn't feel it was important enough to meet with your company. Now, he may have, and I could be completely wrong, but I have a gut feeling on this, if I'm honest with you, and my gut can be wrong at times with it. And just out of interest, when you're saying you put proposal forward, to try and save some of the route, what happened? Because we didn't hear anything. And, the ward councillors who were affected by these devastating cuts, these residents who were absolutely hammered by these cuts, we heard not a lot about it. So what did you get back? What engagement did the council come to you with and say, well, actually, we can't do that, but maybe we can do this? Or did you just put a proposal in and it's floated off down the stream and maybe it will wash past the River Festival?
So there was two, so post ourselves coming here, myself included, in terms of what discussions were had with the mayor or portfolio holder, I'll also take that away. I'll just confirm with Darren, our managing director, what conversations were had. It's probably worth noting, I'm pretty sure the mayor's the same, but Darren has the phone numbers of all the mayors in our area and council leaders, and if any issues they can call him, he makes them aware of that any time, pick up the phone, call me. So in terms of what we discussed after the meeting at the council, we took away some of the feedback. One of the options we looked at was diverting the 28 service down Kimbolton Road to serve closer or part of close to Putney. That was taken forward. That's implemented. That's what's running today. That's a small change to your tendered service. The other service was a service 7, which was essentially loop round where the 10 kind of went, for wanting a better word, and then came in as a 7. So rather than the big loop, counter loop like the 10 and 4 used to do, it took in part of the 10 down to the library in Putney, and then kind of went back as a 7 used to. We put together a cost proposal to say that this is a suggestion from the feedback from the meeting, this seems to be what councillors would like, this is how much it would cost, and then essentially the response was thank you, but we can't, it's not viable. So.
Thank you for that. I believe, as we've had the portfolio holder sat here all evening, and do really appreciate you coming along, Councillor Gribble. It's been a very long evening. I do have a question for you. Sorry?
Are you allowed to ask?
I don't know. Am I allowed to ask the portfolio holder a question? I am. I just want to check that I am. Okay. Councillor Gribble, do you believe residents would say Bedford's bus network is stronger today than it was 3 years ago?
It's a very rhetorical question, Councillor Abbott. I do not want to even suggest what the residents of Bedford may or may not think. And for the record, I have had numerous conversations with Darren Rowe, the stagecoach manager for Bedford East, actually. So I don't know. I mean, you know, there is a history of deregistration in Bedford. This isn't it's not a new thing. The insights I have gained since working with both operators and officers have been hugely useful, and it's given me a real understanding of the complex situations that running public transport poses, to be honest. I can't comment on what our residents would say 3 years ago, so I say very rhetorical. So
I actually thought it was quite a simple yes-no question, but there we go. We will beg to differ on that, but this has been your portfolio. Our bus network is your responsibility, and by the way, this is not a personal attack on you, Councillor Gribble. Please be clear on that. I am going after the portfolio, which looks after this, if that makes sense. So it is. Please do not take this. This is not a personal attack on you. I'll also just say thank you very much for clarifying that you had met, because I just didn't know the answer to the question, and as the representative of Stagecoach didn't know, I do really appreciate your clarification on that. That's that, but it is, I thought it was quite a simple question I asked, but I was wrong. Turns out it was a very nuanced question.
So Charlie, you got one question. You got the question as well?
Thank you, Chair. Oh, do you want to go first, John? No. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Manship's talked about the difficulty getting information, but all the operators have talked about the poor communication, and that's one of the big problems. And I've said that I'm having trouble getting answers from the council, and I have been given financial information by officers, but it's always been predicated with the statement that this is commercially sensitive. I'm not able to disclose it. So tonight I think it's very important that the information which is available is publicly available, and people should know the answers. Now, we take actions now, don't we, on this portfolio? So I want to just make sure that we've got some actions, because I've been trying to get this information and I can't get it out of the council. So I'm asking it tonight as an action. I've still not received a response to my initial question about the £300,000 of BSIP money which council accounts show going to the general funds in February 2025. Now, I just don't know what's happened to it. Now, this is bus service improvement money which should be spent on bus service improvement, not just propping up the council finances. So that's the first thing. I've been given the budgets for 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25 and 25, 26 budgets, which I can share if people want to know that information. But I've not received any indication of exactly where all the money's come from, specifically the split between BSIP, Section 106 funding, so that's the BSIP money that the government give for bus service improvements. Section 106 is the money that we can get out of developers when they develop an estate or something, and also the general council funding as well. I need to know that split on those finances that are coming in, and then I can share that with the bus operators, because it's in the public domain. So you're all entitled to see it. We're told that we've been given 1.418902 BSIP capital for 25-26. That's 1.4 million. However, it's listed as committed, but it's not being spent. Now, how you can not spend it when you're in a bus crisis, I do not know. I just do not know how you can get to the end of a bus crisis and not spend that much capital funding. Only £46,000 is shown as spent. That's indicated by the outturn report of the executive. Now, this is a concern to me, given the lack of transparency over the 300,000 that I was talking about in February 2025. Does that make sense, Chair? I'll carry on. Question number 4. Given that the BSIP funding has not been spent, it would be helpful to know whether there is also Section 106 money which is available, which hasn't been spent. Because that money, again, could be used for routes like you've talked about, for Stagecoach. It could be running a bus around Putney or anywhere else. Kempston could be helping sort this out. And then the 5th question, it'd be extremely helpful to have access to the information concerning income and expenditure proposed for 26-27, broken down in the same way as I want it broken down for 25-26. And this is important. And I can't get the information, so God help you, Mr. Manship. But when I do get the information, and I hope that it will now appear, because I've asked for it at full council and I've asked for it again tonight. It's still not come, and I wanted it for this meeting tonight, so I could talk a bit more intelligently about the figures. When that announcement comes in, I have the funding, then it'll be transparently obvious to everybody. Because this is public money, and we should know where public money goes, where it's spent. Because we plainly see that there's a breakdown in communication between our officers, the council administration, and the bus operators. We need to know what's going on, and let's have some open dialogue. And I'm grateful to Mr. Manship for this document which you've brought along tonight for bus service improvement. I'm sure that you've got ideas yourselves. I hope that we can work with you as a council, because when councillors talk to the bus operators, we seem to make much more progress. So let's get that dialogue going. Thank you.
Councillor Gammell is first. Paul, do you want to comment? Okay, Councillor.
The moment's sort of passed.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver, that will be last question, and after that...
No, are we on comments? Because I think Councillor Royden...
Do you think that was a comment?
Well, it was some questions, but my question to you is, where are those questions going? Have we got those recorded?
Yeah, thank you.
Because I've got a comment when we come on to comments.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Yeah, the trouble is I'm asking these questions and I'm not getting any answers. We've asked this in full council, and I still haven't had the answers. We're a week later. I'm still, this is public money that should be transparent. It should be just get the money, just get a spreadsheet out and give me the figures. It should be that simple. But why all this covert secrecy? You mustn't tell anybody. Why is that? What are we frightened of the public knowing?
Thank you, Councillor Wright.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Royden, I have provided some information to you. I suggest perhaps it might be helpful if we can sit down, you and me, and run through what information you don't have, because I think from my records you do have some of that information, but there's possibly some bits that are missing, so I'd welcome the opportunity to sit down with you. It's certainly not secret information, it's certainly not information that we can't share, and we've got, well, me personally, and I believe my officers have got no reason to keep that from anybody of the committee. So if we can sit down and just understand that, we can providely give you that information. Sorry, Charles.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, it's quite clear what answers I haven't got, because I've just said now the answers I haven't got. And so those are the answers I want. But when I've been given information previously, yes, information has been shared with me, but it's been prefaced with, this is commercially sensitive, so I can't share it with anybody else. Well, that's no good. That doesn't help me if I can't tell people what's going on. I need to know in an open manner, and it's only the monitoring officer who's told me this information isn't confidential. It's only the monitoring officer who's done that. So I need this information. I need to be able to share it with bus companies so that we can talk about what's going on and find a way. There's 5 questions there of things that I don't know the answers to. Now, I have got some information which has been told that it's commercially sensitive, but I haven't got the answers to those 5 questions.
I'm very happy to sit down with. I think there may be confusion over commercially sensitive and confidential and stuff like that in regarding elements of passenger numbers and stuff, but we can sort that out. Like I said, very happy to work with you and get the information you require and publish that or present that wherever needed.
I think the monitoring officers had an email for over a week, which has been passed around officers. No, just answer the email. Just give me the numbers.
Thank you, Councillor Ryden. We are conscious of time. I'll move on to the comments. Councillor Oliver?
I don't think you need to sit down with Councillor Royden. It's already the subject of a council motion and one of those 5 points was to publish information about funding, about PSIP, so that can all be rolled into responses to that motion and should be sent out to everybody, not just to Councillor Royden.
Well, I'm going to disseminate it on Monday.
There's too many Chinese whispers going on. I'd say the same to Councillor Surra. It's not about rural or urban or rural. We've actually got less bus services in our towns, Kempston and Bedford at the moment, than a lot of the rural areas have. At least they have a bus or two. We should be talking about the bus network. That's what we need to do. And we need to come up, and that's in the motion as well, we need to come up with a network that will be fit for purpose for the future for this borough. Because with EWR and Universal and things that are on the horizon, now's the time to get this sorted. And I don't think, again, it's a question of, and bus companies have been very, very upfront and very willing to communicate with individual councillors, but it's going to take a lot of your time doing that. Why don't we have something like a bus forum where anybody who's interested can meet with officers, bus operators, councillors, and have that kind of discussion. And then those who are interested can come along, and those who aren't don't come along. But that would maybe be a way forward, and would kill lots of birds with lots of stones and save you a lot of time.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Councillor White, you got a comment, and then Councillor Everett.
Quick comment. I think that's a marvellous idea. Very good. I would just like to say thank you to Thomas for the vision that you sent over, and for the sake of residents, I think we need to keep pursuing this to get the best we can for them. And I was going to say, yeah, thank you to both of you. What was I going to say now? Oh yeah, please can you thank your staff? I use both of your bus services, and the difference that your staff make to people getting on that bus day in, day out, and it is noticed, and I have sort of like written in and said, but it makes a lot of difference to my residents' lives when they get on, and your staff are cheerful and pleasant, and that's a positive part of it. So thank you to the staff. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. I'd certainly like to echo the thanks to both bus operators and your staff. They are fantastic. They are helpful. They are the sort of people we want in frontline public roles. So please do take that back to your various depots and pass that on. Thank you also for coming and being so candid with us tonight. That is really appreciated. We've seen an awful lot of challenges outlined. What we have heard from Stagecoach, we've heard from Grant Palmer, and we heard in the email from Uno that there is a very similar philosophy from all of you, is actually you want to make things work. You want to work with us